All right, just so you guys know, we're live.
Thanks, Jamel. I'll give it another minute. All right, I show 6:30. When ready? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 12th, Monday, April 12th, 2021, Town of Scarborough Planning Board meeting. I've called this meeting to order. If you could all join me, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thanks, Jay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Doreen, could you do the roll for us, please?
Nicholas McGee,
Here.
Rachel Hendrickson,
Here.
Roger Beely,
Here.
Rick Meinking,
Here.
Jennifer Labb's absent, and Rick Duperi and Russell Scudder not present yet.
All right, thank you. 4 is a quorum, so we will proceed. We have the minutes for the February 22nd, 2021 and the March 15th, 2021 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review those? Take a motion to approve those.
Moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, Roger Beely,
Yes.
Rachel Hendrickson,
Yes.
Rick Meinking,
Yes.
Nick McGee, yes. Show that unanimous, thank you. Before we jump into the bulk of the agenda, I just want to quickly make an announcement to everyone that's participating this evening that we do have a very, very busy agenda this evening. So if you've been here before and presented your plans, just a quick overview of maybe what's changed or what we asked you to change. And then if you're proposing for the first time, if you could please limit your presentation to no longer than 10 to 15 minutes max. That way we can squeeze in the time for board deliberation and questions from the public. Thank you very much. First item tonight is the planning board will conduct a public hearing to receive comment on proposed property owner initiated amendments to chapter 405 of the zoning ordinance, section 20, business office research district, BOR, subsection C, special exemption uses. Jay, are you taking this one?
I can certainly give it a quick intro, and then I see Mike Tadamawian is here to speak on behalf of the, and Bob Goudreau as well, I actually see. But just to the board, just briefly, this is a property owner initiated zoning amendment request for, as you just read, inclusion of additional uses as a special exception in the BOR zoning district. The BOR zoning district is a fairly small zoning district the town has on sort of the northern portion of Route 1 as one heads towards South Portland. The applicant did have an early public a workshop with town council in terms of approach to the request, and that's what they come forward with you here. And I'll turn it over to their team to describe it further.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Jay. Hi, my name is Mike Tadamawian. I'm a civil engineer with Teradyne Consultants, and Bob Goudreau is on the call as well. He's the property owner here. And we've submitted as Jay mentioned, we've submitted an owner-initiated request for a zone change in the BOR zone. And sorry, let me share my screen here. I've got a sort of a short presentation I can show you, and I will do promise to keep it brief here. Hopefully you can all see the screen. What you're looking at is just an excerpt of the Scarborough zoning map. And this area that's in maroon is the BOR zone. Like Jay said, it's a fairly compact zone. Right on, this is Route 1, and it's, it abuts the South Portland, the boundary between Scarborough and South Portland. Contour Properties is the property owner here, and Bob Goudreau is the sole member of Contour Properties, and they own Science Park subdivision, as well as another parcel to the north that's also in the BOR zone. But Science Park subdivision, as I think some of you know, was subdivided originally back in, I think, 1980 or the late 70s, and was sort of amended or turned into a condominium several years ago, when Mr. Goudreau bought it. He has since redeveloped one building in there. It's the former Center for Blood Research building. It's now operates as an office building. And Bob's been approached by a residential care provider in the state to develop a residential long-term care facility on the property. Unfortunately, it's currently not allowed in the zone. So we did, in fact, meet with council. We had a workshop with council about adding this use to the zone. And we also discussed whether or not a contract zone was the way to go for this. Council was supportive of the use and debated whether or not we should go contract zone or request a zone amendment. And ultimately, they advised us to seek the owner-initiated amendment. So we have held a workshop, and then we held a first reading with council. I would say both were positively received, and now it's as the process goes, it's in front of you, and as the planning board, as I understand it, you are to give a recommendation back to council, and we'll go back to them for 2 more meetings. Just quickly, I can talk. I'll show you I'll describe to you what the use is that we're proposing to add to this zone. So residential and long-term care facilities for the ill, aged, or disabled is a facility which provides full-time convalescent or chronic care to individuals who, by reason of advanced age, chronic illness, or infirmity, are unable to care for themselves. This is a use that's currently allowed in 2 zones in Scarborough, one of which is the Town and Village Center District, and the other is in the Running Hill Gorham Road Mixed Use District. And if I quickly go back to the zoning map, the Town and Village Center District is this orange district that's immediately adjacent to the BOR, just south on Route 1. And it's in the 2 zones it is allowed, it's allowed as a special exception. And so for consistency, council advised us that it would probably be appropriate if this were also a special exception in the BOR zone. And so finally, what's shown here now on the screen are the permitted uses in the Business Office Research District. That they include medical and diagnostic facilities. I'm not going to read them all. I'm sure you're familiar with many of these. And then the special exceptions. There are 3 special exceptions currently: group daycare homes, daycare center facilities, and nursery schools, adjunct uses, places of worship, public utility facilities, and the request from the property owner is to add residential and long-term care facilities for the ill, aged, or disabled to the list of special exceptions. So that's it in a nutshell. That concludes what I have to share tonight, but we're happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a public hearing, so I will open this up to those that are in attendance to see if there's anyone that'd like to speak on this. If you do, please use the raise my hand feature found in the lower right-hand corner of your program. All right, seeing none, I'll turn this back over to the board. I guess I'll just open it up for anyone that wants to ask a question or has any thoughts regarding the proposed change. Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, I was on the board when this, when the request to become a condo association came through. And that's a good quality development down there. And I have no concerns about approving this, recommending the approval to the board. The town council will get this right sooner or later. But I think it's an appropriate use. The older I get, the more I start looking for places like that just in case. So I'm in favor of it.
Thanks, Rachel. Roger?
Yeah, excuse me. I was just I have no problem with this either. I just was wondering, is this going to be more like an assisted living facility, or is it going to be more like a memory care facility, or something in between? Do we know yet?
This is Bob Goodrow, the owner and developer. It would be a main care facility.
Main care, sort of like assisted living?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, all right. I have no problem with this.
Thanks, Roger. I have a technical question, and I don't know if Jay or Jamal or Bob or Michael might be able to help me with this. When it's written as residential and long-term facilities for the ill-aged or disabled, do we have a definition that encompasses ill-aged or disabled?
So the whole use, the whole phraseology there that you just listed is a defined use. And I think that was what Michael was showing on an earlier screen. So you take the whole phrase as one unit. You don't break it apart into different components, if you will. So the definition, I don't have it directly in front of me.
That was my concern, because I mean, I just wanted to be sure that when it says residential long-term care facilities, for the ill age, we weren't talking about a 55 plus condominium community being developed under this set of regulations. And largely because if I were to have an issue with this, it's largely because the purpose listed under business office research district clearly states that they want it to be for growth and development of high quality office and research uses, and that result in the area becoming a major employment center. So this becomes a residential use, and that causes me concern. But the fact that if you're telling me that the aged part of it doesn't mean I'm going to start seeing 55 plus condo communities popping up in all BOR districts because of this change, I'd feel a little bit better about it. Does that make sense?
And that, right. So again, looking back at that definition, it really is about sort of, one of the complexities with our zoning ordinances, we really sort of define this assisted living type community 3 different ways. In some zones, we talk about nursing homes. In some zones, we use this definition. And there's a third, boarding care facilities for the elderly, or roughly anyway. And they really all relate to, at least in my read of them, really the same type of assisted living facility.
Okay. And then does the zoning board get a chance to review this as well?
That's what the special exception process does, is essentially the zoning board first, before it comes to the planning board for a site plan review, it will go to the Board of Appeals. zoning board, and they would look at it. Really, those standards are, again, just from sort of a broad standpoint, sort of how does it fit within the neighborhood, the context of the neighborhood. And so, yes, the zoning board would get a first review and approval of it before it comes to planning board for site plan.
Thanks, Jay. Roger?
Yeah, the purpose of my question was if it's assisted living, theoretically, everybody who is there would have a vehicle, for instance. Where if it's more like a nursing home facility or a memory care, that's not the case. It would be parking primarily for staff and support people. But I don't have a problem with it either way, though. I was just kind of curious.
Michael?
Yeah, if I can, I'll just chime in here. So the facility we're talking about, and clearly what kind of development is what use is determined by the code enforcement officer. But the type of facility we're talking about here, the residents will not be allowed to have cars. And so it is more, it doesn't fit the definition of a nursing home under the state guidelines. The state has a definition of nursing home. But in this case, it's folks that are, like the definition says, aged, advanced age, chronic illness or infirmity, and they're unable to care for themselves. So I wouldn't, when I think of assisted living, this is not assisted living in the sense that the folks are getting in their car and going to the grocery store or something like that. All their care, all their needs are met on site, and they're not leaving the site in their own vehicles, certainly. So there is another. And Mr. Chair, to your point, there is another definition in the ordinance called senior housing, and that's an apartment style multifamily dwelling for and that's a sort of the traditional 55 and over facility. So this is not that. This is more of not a nursing home, but more in that vein.
Appreciate that. Bob?
They're not allowed to have cars. They're not mobile.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Rick Meinking.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's any value in adding a little descriptor by saying it's a licensed long-term care facility. Long-term care has all different levels: congregate housing, PNMI. There's all different classifications. And you go to a nursing home, you have a traditional nursing home, and then you have a skilled nursing facility. If this is truly a PNMI facility that you're putting in there, there is potential for the residents to have their license still. The purpose of long-term care is because they have lost some activities of daily lives, and there's a Gould assessment that is put out, and it assesses whether that person can live on their own or with help. And by putting in licensed residential and long-term care facility, I think that brings in the component where there will be nursing and nursing facilities. The higher you go, obviously your skilled nursing facility, then you have quite an elaborate medical department, and it works its way down. And then finally, that senior housing, independent living could be, known as the 55 and older and those kind of things, where they live in a multifamily structure or in duplexes and kind of these smaller ranches like you see Mongolia Place or places like that in Scarborough. So I just wonder if maybe adding in there as the term, having it say it's a licensed residential long-term care facility. That's all.
Thanks, Rick. Did the applicant have any thoughts or even staff regarding what that impact might be to add that language?
From staff's perspective, I haven't worked through the the different iterations like that to know sort of the different levels. And I guess I would suggest I need to do a bunch more research to really provide any type of thoughts from staff's perspective, other than to say this is a definition that the town's had for probably at least the 15 years I've been working in town. So certainly it may be time for it to be looked at again, but.
Thanks. So I guess there's my other thought is it possible to see a residential development specifically designed for a disabled person, which we all know disabilities can go from hearing loss to, blindness, where you might see, would that be possible under including this definition? I think what would help me is if I saw the definition for ill-aged or disabled. I think that would help clarify it a little bit.
Yeah, I guess what I would say the experience that I'm familiar with in town under this definition would be the Casa House. I'm not sure if it's Casa House or just Casa, that's off of Gorham Road, just north of Oak Hill, where I believe that's more to the further from the aged and more to the disabled. But again, I think when the term is defined as it is, you really take the whole piece and you don't. So but I guess as an example, that would be what I look at is the Casa House.
All right.
Yeah, I have a feeling this might be something similar to the Pine Point Nursing Home. Does that ring a bell? I was thinking initially of Scarborough Terrace, but that's not a Medicaid facility. That's private pay.
So again, our definition doesn't concern itself with how people pay. It's the use type, and it's so I would have to look because again, we have a couple of similar what I consider similar definitions in terms of nursing home, which we don't define, but we do have as a permitted or special exception use in places. We have boarding care for the elderly, which is another defined term, which does start to get into, Nick, I think more the type of independent type living. And so as that's a separate defined use, I think if someone sort of came in for that independent type living, we'd say, well, you're really more this boarding care for the elderly rather than the residential care can't exactly remember the phraseology.
No, I know
but this use. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Yeah, I would say presumably the operators are the ones who make the choice whether somebody is suitable for their facility or not. That the person may be suitable for the 55 and over, or they may be suitable for as a nursing home. I think as I've seen this definition used, it's kind of a bridge for people in between being able to live on their own and being ready for a much more rigorous medical care. And I go back to what Jay said at the beginning. We can't parse it by taking out each word and looking at it separately, that it is ill-aged or aged, ill, or disabled. And we have to look at it all together rather than speculate, does somebody meet one definition or not the other?
Yeah, just so I'm clear, I'm not necessarily worried about the type of people that would live there, but the types of developments that might try to squeeze in under the current definition, if allowed to go forward as presented. That was mostly where I was headed with it. Roger?
Yeah, the only other point I think is that the people who want to operate this and place it in this particular location, obviously they feel comfortable that it's kind of an isolated spot. It's not like people are going to be out walking around and roaming around the properties or anything. So it's pretty isolated right there. So if the if this organization that has these multiple unit, facilities around the state feel comfortable with this location, I think it would fit there fine.
Yeah, and Roger, I appreciate that. I think the thing to keep in mind is that the district, this changes the zoning for the entire district, not just that one location. If we were talking about the one location, I think they'd be pursuing the contract zone versus, an entire zoning change for that entire area. So other facilities could come in under this change. But I understand, I appreciate that. Any more discussion? No? Okay, so what I've heard so far, and we're just looking for a recommendation to council. What I've heard so far, and you guys can please correct me if I'm wrong, out of the board members that are here, that the majority of the board feels that this would be an appropriate change, given the discussion that we've had. I would add that I would probably be the dissenting voice out of the majority, and not because I don't like the proposal or what you're participating, but I do have concerns about adding residential aspects to a business office district. So that said, though, the majority would put forth a favorable opinion of this. So thank you very much. Number 6, planning board will conduct a public hearing to receive comment on proposed amendments to chapter 405 of the zoning ordinance, section 6, definitions. Jamel or Jay?
Yes, I will take this one. This is actually a proposal that has been brought forward through the town council discussion and the town manager. There's been a great deal of interest in a project that was recently approved by the planning board under the current regulations down Washington Avenue for actually Manson Libby Road, where the ICE facility offices, what have you, are going in. There's been quite a bit of interest around that, and as board members may recall, when we reviewed that process, we have a very broad definition of non-municipal government uses. It basically says any agency of the state, federal, or county are fit in that use. And so I think there's been some, like I said, interest by council to try to at least put some parameters in around those type of uses to limit the potential for holding cells, detention facilities, and those sorts of activities. And so this definition is aimed at addressing those concerns.
Thanks, Jay. And we don't have anyone, this is not user promoted, so we don't have anyone else to speak on this, correct?
Correct. And I guess what I should offer is the ICE facility that's going in was approved as, under the existing language, which, and so they've sort of met all their requirements. And what this essentially would do would make that a non-conforming use moving forward. So it would still exist as was previously approved, but it would make it a non-conforming use, just for what it's worth.
Thanks. Roger?
Yeah, Jay, would this, I'm in agreement with this, but would this hold up legally? Because theoretically, if every municipality in the country proposed something like this, basically have no jails.
Roger, are you asking Jay for legal advice?
I guess what I would say is there are, I think the thing to keep in mind, there are federal and state preemptions to home rule. There's processes they would need to go through to usurp local authority, but so it's not to say it couldn't happen, but this, at least, I think my read on my hearing, I should say, of the council discussion to date is that this is what council felt that what the council as a body felt comfortable putting forward with respect to any future discussions within the municipality authority.
All right, I'm gonna open this up for public discussion. I don't know if there's anyone here in attendance that wanted to speak on this item. But if you do, please use the raise my hand feature and we'll put you in so we can hear your thoughts. But we will be limiting comments to 3 minutes this evening, just based on the size and length of scope of our agenda. I don't see any public comment. So I'll close public comments and then just for the board to comment on this. Thoughts? Anyone? No? Rachel?
Yeah, certainly I've been subject to comments about the process that got iced down there with various folks concerned and sending me personal messages. I think this is a reasonable response. While the government can preempt, if it wants to, it would have to go through a very long process. And this sort of language, I think, kind of says, you know, you really will have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money to get this to put something else in if you want to preempt the town in this area. So it makes it more likely that rather than any expansion or other facilities, that the government would simply go elsewhere to another town. I think this is a reasonable response to a situation that has divided folks in Scarborough, has certainly created some anxiety and a lot of activism. And I think this is a reasonable and about the best that we can hope for at this time.
Thanks, Rachel. I just have a quick, for my two, quick language or clarification on number 2 under the definition. And it says non-municipal government offices, the offices of any department, commission, agency, or instrumentality of the United States, the state of Maine, the county of Cumberland, or any other governmental authority or district. Non-municipal government offices do not include any temporary or permanent holding facilities, jails, or prisons, which are not permitted in any zoning district. It's the last part of that, which are not permitted in any zoning district. What do we, is it unless otherwise permitted in a zoning district? I think I'm a little caught up on the language there.
Yeah, I guess I would probably defer that question to the town's legal review. I'm, to be quite honest, not certain if the town's attorney helped craft this language. So we can certainly flag that as a question. But that is my read, that unless it's otherwise allowed in some other zoning district, they aren't allowed. So let's say I'll just use the BOR because we were just talking about it. We say jails are permitted, then a jail cell would be permitted. Currently, none of our zones say that. So
I think I'm getting caught up with the do not include, and then there was which are not permitted. I think there's like two negatives floating around in that sentence that are throwing me off a little. And I don't know if it's just a misunderstanding on my part, but I feel like it just could be cleared up a little bit more. And Rachel, you have a background in English.
Yes, well, I was going to speak as the grammar police, the role I play in the long range planning. And it's legalese, but it says what it needs to say. In other words, it's acceptable language. It's clear. There's enough clarity that people understand the intent. And if a lawyer wrote it, certainly lawyers understand what they mean. But basically, if there's a facility that is not permitted anyplace else and is not permitted, then non-municipal government buildings and that are prisons or holding cells are not permitted. I mean, that's really now terribly fuzzy, but it makes sense.
It does make sense. Okay.
Yeah.
It could be just me. I just didn't know if there was a cleaner way to get to
Yeah,
that point.
there
But
probably is, but I said
Yeah.
this is legal language and the lawyers will end up interpreting it if somebody wants to put in something. Then all of a sudden this language comes into question. Somebody wants to build something. Lawyers understand it.
thanks, Rachel. All right. Any other comments on this? General reception from the board. We are all set with this proposal. Okay, thank you. Next item on tonight's agenda. State Manufactured Homes Inc. requests a final subdivision review for Pinecrest Manufactured Homes Community, Assessors Map 56, lots 9, 11, and 12. Jamel.
Chair, so this project's located in the R2 zoning district with access actually through South Portland because it's located on the city boundary. So as the board may recall, the project was granted approval for miscellaneous appeal for the expansion of a legal non-conforming use by the ZBA back in November. So this approval grants up to 143 units for the project, and the traditional review criteria for a subdivision, such as net res calculation and space and bulk, do not apply. The applicant's proposing to add 32 new units to the existing manufactured housing community. The proposal also includes a new looped private access drive, which provides a connection to the existing community along Topaz Drive. So at this point, staff doesn't have any further comments. We did provide the board with a draft motion for your consideration. Turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jamel. Andy?
Yes, good evening, everybody. You will recall this was in front of you in February for preliminary review. At that time, we had some discussion about screening and landscaping, and I think we generally answered the board's questions on those topics. We also had just a couple of very minor technical comments, and the big reason why we didn't come back and we weren't able to come back in March is because DEP was still in the process of writing the permit, even though they completed their review. So we have all the permits in hand now. As Jamel said, we've addressed all those technical comments. So from our perspective, I think we are in good shape. If the board has any other technical comments or questions, we can certainly help and assist in answering those. I think there was one other item that we wanted to discuss with the board this evening, which was the matter of growth permits. And I think Alan Beagle is on the line here to chat a little bit about that. But I say I will take a back seat on that discussion, but I will be available for any other questions you have regarding the plans or any of the technical details.
Thanks, Andy. Alan? Alan, you're on mute. I don't know if you're talking right now.
Yeah, am I on the audio now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I apologize. It doesn't look like my camera is working, but as I said a moment ago, you're not missing anything in that regard. I've been asked to speak on behalf of the State Manufactured Homes regarding this past week, actually just a week ago, it came to our attention through a counselor that perhaps the growth management ordinance that's of Scarborough's is some way tied into this, and applicable. And we've been, or State Manufactured Homes has been dealing with the expansion of Pinecrest for over, I think since March of 2019, and this really hadn't arisen at all to us. And I spoke, since then we've become somewhat familiar with the growth management ordinance. And today I was able to speak with Jay about its applicability, and his feeling is that it is applicable. And frankly, upon looking at the ordinance, I believe it is applicable in terms of the fact that we are dealing here with dwelling units, manufactured homes, and we are this is it's kind of late in the process to be addressing this, but in fact, under the growth management ordinance, the planning board, it's an issue for the planning board if you are going to, if a property owner is to get a growth management permit, which it is required to, it appears as if it was required to do, the planning board, if there are only a certain number, I'm not sure of the familiarity of the planning board with this issue, but I'm sure, speaking with Jay today, that he's very familiar with it, and perhaps he can explain the process. And if we are going to, if the state is going to get the planning, the necessary growth management permits, it may have to do so through what's called the reserve portions of the ordinance. Maybe Jay can speak to it and explain what this is, why this is applicable, and explain our conversation today so that we can have the board understand why this is a matter really which is applicable.
Jay, you care to help in this area?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's really two things going on tonight. So I want to be sure that we take them separately. They do come together, but certainly what the board has before you is an application, a subdivision application to enable some 30 odd new units in town. And so that's really what's been reviewed through the the subdivision review process and the zoning board process, which I think Andy alluded to earlier in his discussion. And so that's really it's something that the board can take up and has really been the focus of our review to date. The growth management ordinance is really as board members are probably been certainly aware of and maybe paying attention to the council workshops. It's really a pace of growth ordinance. It's about how quickly can otherwise approved projects by the planning board build out. And it's really intended to sort of measure out or meter out the pace of that development so as to not overwhelm certain services in the community. And so this is an ordinance that's been in place. I believe it was originally adopted in 2001 and significantly amended in 2008. So council's, let's see, so there are in the growth management ordinance, and again, I think some board members have been through this process before. There's an annual allocation of 135 growth permits that are available. And really, those are first come, first served, if you will. And then there's a reserve pool. And the reserve pool is a pool of growth permits, the number of which is set and determined by the town council. Town council in 2017, I believe it was, increased that to 500. It was 215 and they bumped it up to 500, if I remember the numbers precisely. And there's certain projects that can be deemed eligible to pull from the reserve pool, but that needs to be a determination by the planning board. Some of those projects are contract zone projects. So a good example would be the Beacon or Piper Shores. And so though I said it's determined by the planning board, really that's determined by council through the contract zone process. And then really as a perfunctory step, the planning board sort of follows suit, if you will, in agreeing that they can pull from the reserve pool. Another way of accessing or other projects that are eligible from the reserve pool are projects that are otherwise taking advantage or utilizing the density bonus provisions in our zoning ordinance to provide for affordable housing or for open space. So I think an example of this might be Carrier Woods, I think is a good example up on Muzzy Road, where some of those units are defined to be affordable and then they took advantage of the provisions that allow for bonuses. Then the other one, which is projects in which at least 50% of the units are determined to be affordable. And so these would be projects such as the, I think a good example is Bessie Commons across the street, the conversion of the Bessie School, or maybe even a more recent approval by the board was the South Portland housing off of Little Dolphin, where they're providing affordable housing and they were 100% affordable. So I guess the question back to the applicant would be, which of the sort of categories would their units qualify under? And it could be, so I guess that would be the starting question. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. Hopefully I've provided some clarity around the issue. And I guess I should say that just as a reminder, when we talk about affordable housing, we have the town, again, some board members are probably around within the last 2 or 3 years, there's a pretty significant rewrite of the affordable housing definition, and it's 80% of the Portland area median income. And so an applicant sort of needs to demonstrate how they're going to meet those and how they're either for sale prices or rental, because there's a difference there. It can be rental and it can be for sale. So they need to sort of demonstrate how they're meeting those definitions, if that's the approach.
Thanks, Jay. So, step one is getting the subdivision approval through. Step two, I assume are we dealing with both this evening? We're being asked to deal with both this evening?
Well, I guess I would just offer, it would be typically when the board is asked to pull from the reserve pool, there's been evidence provided that talks about, how they're meeting those provisions. So I'm not sure that we have anything on record to date, but the conversation I had with Mr. Beagle earlier in the day was that certainly projects can come in for amendments. Right. At this point, there's been no discussion about whether these are market rate, affordable housing, what the any restrictions, I should say, on those. So if the project gets approved as it is today, these the property owner should be well within the rights to sell or rent or lease or whatever the case may be at any price they so chose. If they wish to come in at a future date, a follow-up meeting in the near future, and then put further restrictions on the property to say, okay, at least 50% of these will be affordable, and then work with, provide documentation of how that would happen. I could see that could happen at a subsequent amendment. If the applicant certainly wishes to sort of do it all at once, that could happen, but I don't see how that could happen this evening. But I believe could be a two-step process to this question.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. So we're just focusing on the subdivision this evening then.
And I think just one other thing I do want to mention, just for the benefit of those who are watching, Town Council is currently really in the process of taking a very in-depth look at the growth management ordinance itself. And there's actually 2 items that have been on their recent agendas. One is sort of a smaller, more tactical adjustment to the existing ordinance, but there's also a proposed repeal and replace that has been brought forward by Town Council. I think the questions are still very much open as to where the end of what the end product will look like. And so certainly staff's happy to have further conversations with the applicants about all of this.
Thanks, Jay. Rachel?
Yeah, I was just wondering, for the benefit of the applicant, if you know how many permits had been pulled from the reserve pool thus far this year.
Oh gosh, I had the spreadsheet up. I just sent it to the development team earlier today. I believe this year, was it this year or was that, yeah, that was 21. As I recall, there are about 100 and I'm going to say 56 permits left in the reserve pool. How many were pulled this year? I think I'm going to go ahead and say 52 because I think it was Piper Shores came in and pulled their growth permits, if I recall.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you. That may help the applicant determining how it's going to move forward.
Roger?
To Jay, I have two questions. The appropriateness of this requirement at this stage of the process, where the applicant has gone this far with their planning and everything, is it? I mean, this seems like it's a last minute type of demand, maybe. And the second thought I had is, these are not very expensive homes in my estimation. And I just wonder, I mean, I think almost all of these, I may be wrong about this, but I think they could almost be, defined as affordable housing. And they could be both market as well as affordable at the same time.
Yeah, so I guess, Roger, couple of things I note on that. To the first point, I would say, I think the applicant just became aware that our growth permits, I mean, this is to say it's an odd year is an understatement. We, as board members, I think we've made you all aware, the town ran out of sold, however issued, however you wish to say it, all our annual allocation growth permits by January, I think it was 21st or 26th or some such date. Within the first 4 weeks of the year, unlike anything else we had ever seen. So, I truly do believe this is something that has caught the applicant unawares. As board members, one of the things, as I sort of said, really they're separate issues, because the board's job is really about, because there's no limit on the number of projects that can be approved in town. Folks can get, there could be 24 more subdivisions that stack up. It's really the growth management ordinance is the secondary step about them pacing out or metering out the pace of that growth. Communities have a choice whether to have a growth management. I guess I don't need to, we don't need to sort of go down the rabbit hole of the whole state statute on growth management ordinances. But I guess to the first point, I do believe the applicant was unaware with the benefit of hindsight and wishing we had clairvoyance, we could have brought this up earlier. So that was your first question. And dang, if I didn't lose track of, in terms of the affordability, I guess that's really the piece that I had noted, that I think that's where typically when these requests come to the board, there's documentation that identifies that it's affordable, and then there's a note on the plan. So it very well may be that they could get there, but that's, I guess that would be the next iteration of maybe an amended application that might come in maybe in short order.
Thanks, Jay. I have Rachel, I see you. I have Alan does had his hand up for a little bit. Alan, you want to chime in real quick?
I think Jay's covered it pretty well. As he said, this was totally out of left field for us, and we certainly would have addressed it. And my understanding from Jay is that this, and from Andy too, this is really a separate issue than before you denied, and that the application can be, or an application for an amendment to the approval would not be a lengthy process and can be handled pretty quickly, and we can come up with the statistics and determine and provide them to the planning board to prove that this qualifies as affordable housing under one of the categories in the zoning ordinance. I don't think that's a problem. And again, I just reiterate what Jay said. we would have addressed this long ago if we knew it was an issue. That's certainly true.
All right, thanks, Alan.
Thank
Rachel?
you.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind folks that when we use the term affordable housing, the first criteria is the income cap on the people who are going to be living there. And then the buildings have to be, the apartments, houses, or whatever residents need to be affordable to people at those income levels. So it's not just that the housing is, relatively inexpensive compared to some housing here in Scarborough now, but that it really goes to the income level. And I do think this is an item that needs bifurcation with an approval of the subdivision, and wait until we get an amended application from the applicants.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other questions from the planning board regarding the plan? Seen it a few times. So, Jay, I believe you do have a motion ready. Or Jamel. Maybe Angela tonight.
Jamel's usually a bit quicker at pulling these things up. Maybe it's even Angela. One of us has it.
I can, I'm working on it. Just give me a sec. All right. You guys see it okay?
I'm going to change my viewing options just to make sure it's a little bigger on my side.
Thank you, Nick. I was having difficulty, and I do need to point out that I didn't get a copy of any motions.
Sorry about that, Rachel.
All right, I can read it. Actually, can you scroll it over a little for some reason to the left, my left? I don't know if that's your left too on a computer.
Is that better?
It's just it's snug against, I can't read the left side of the document. That's better. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I move to approve the project titled Pinecrest Manufactured Housing Community proposed by State Manufactured Homes, Inc. as depicted on the plan set prepared by Atlantic Resource Consultants dated 3/12/21 with the following findings and conditions. Findings: the proposed project includes the addition of 32 new units to the existing manufactured housing community. The proposed expansion also includes a new looped private road, providing a connection to the existing development along Topaz Drive. Subdivision is located within the residential R2 zoning district and is further identified on the town of Scarborough tax maps as map R56, lots 9, 11, and 12. Conditions: 1. Prior to the release of a signed plan for recording at the Registry of Deeds, the applicant is to secure a performance guarantee in accordance of section 9 of the subdivision ordinance. 2, prior to the issuance of the first building permit, the applicant shall A, coordinate with the police department in regards to addressing the new units within the subdivision, B, pay the recreation contribution fees, C, pay the traffic impact fees, and 3, prior to the start of construction, a pre-construction meeting is required. Meeting shall include appropriate town staff, the developer, and their site contractor, and is to be coordinated through the planning department. That's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Roger Beely.
Yes.
Rachel Hendrickson.
Yes.
Rick Meinking.
Yes.
Nick McGee. Yes. I show that unanimous. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda this evening is Firehouse Ventures LLC requests a preliminary subdivision and site plan review for 246 US Route 1, Assessors Map U43, lots 56 and 66. Jamal.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So as you may recall, this project's located in the TBC zoning district at the former town public safety building, located along Route 1 at Oak Hill. The applicant's proposing a mixed-use development consisting of a 31-unit apartment building for affordable senior housing, the renovation of the former public safety building for a mix of uses, and also provides a construction site for commercial use in the future. So as requested by the board and the town traffic consultant, the applicant has modified the access along Fairfield Road into an enter-only driveway. The applicant also modified the access along Route 1 to include a right-out only driveway. So staff is generally comfortable with the proposed design, but the board and the applicant should refer to the traffic peer review for specific comments related to the proposed design of the right-out only driveway. The applicant has also included additional architectural materials for the proposed apartment building and the former public safety buildings on the property, and should be sure to provide the board with an update on the proposed design approach. The applicant also continues to propose to relocate the existing Betts Diner Memorial to the interior of the site. And staff would like to note that they did provide additional materials explaining their rationale for the relocation. And staff has engaged the town's historic committee, historic preservation implementation committee, and will continue to work with them and the applicant in regards to the design of the memorial. As previously noted during the last review, the applicant is proposing a shared parking program with 78 total spaces. And this proposal is actually allowed by the zoning ordinance in order to reduce the construction of unnecessary impervious area. So the planning board may approve the shared parking program if it will substantially meet the intent of the parking requirements. And finally, the applicant's formally requesting growth permits from the reserve pool. So given that the residential component is proposed to be 100% affordable units, staff would like to note that the proposal does meet the provisions set forth in the zoning ordinance. At this point, I'll ask Jay to speak on some points about the review process.
Thanks, Jamel. So board members will know I sent a memo late in the week. Just bring the board up to speed and with regards to some relatively recent amendments to state statute that enable the municipal review body, the planning board, to make determination that the site plan review criteria are really the driving review criteria and provisions that the board would use to review this type of project that might otherwise require both site plan review and subdivision review. Board members will note that when we've done these type of reviews in the past, the site plan review criteria have really been the driving review criteria that we focus on, and the subdivision component is really sort of more of a perfunctory step, and it can cause some just administrative complexities, not just on the town side, but future, just the property record, if you will. And so this was something that the Maine legislature recognized and made adjustments to the state statute to identify the sort of efficiency and clarity that providing a municipality does have a site plan review with the requisite provisions that can be the governing review authority. So it really doesn't change anything that would be in staff comments or the board's review authority, public process, public notification, or anything of that effect. Really, all it does is change a couple of comments that were in staff's memo about just some very minor notation on the subdivision plat, where again, really ostensibly the main thrust of the review is around the site plan details. So certainly, nothing gets it's every bit as stringent with all your other with all your review authority. If the board's so inclined, staff has a couple of draft motions depending on what the board's interest is in terms of moving forward. And this would be applicable not only to this project, to other projects as well. So I'm happy to answer questions on that. But again, I think, there are pathways forward, however the board wishes to go. And so understanding we have a full agenda before us, I don't want to, if the board's comfortable, that's great. If there's discussion needed, well, I think we can address that as well.
Thanks, Jay. And for Team Firehouse, there's several of you here. So Will or Sam? I'm taking a shot in the dark.
Actually, this is Jack Soley. I'm just going to quickly lead it off, if that's all right.
Sure.
So thank you. So So just a quick intro and thanks, Jay, for presenting that, and also for Jamel for going over the plan as well. So just briefly, with us is my development partner, Tim Hebert, Tom Errico from TY Lin, traffic engineer, Sam LaBelle is from Acorn Engineering, and Jesse Thompson from Kaplan Thompson, as well as Nate Howes from Avesta Housing. So the board has seen this project before, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I know you have a full agenda, but just to quickly recap, as Jamel said, it's the rehab of the former fire and police station, as well as the for new tenancy, as well as moving the Betts Memorial Diner to what we feel is a better landscape site within the site. We also will be, we're proposing a 31 unit housing project at the rear of the site, affordable 55 plus housing. And then numerous alterations to the site to make it more manageable and for both pedestrian as well as traffic entry and egress. So with that, I will turn it over to Sam, but if there are any other questions, just to let you know, the full board, that we are all here. And our goal tonight is obviously just to, as Jay said, is to achieve site plan approval for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Sam LaBelle with Acorn Engineering. Pleased to be here tonight, helping represent this exciting redevelopment. So just a quick walk through the site as a refresher. At the top right corner of the plan, we have the proposed 3-story apartment building managed by Avesta, which would provide 31 new homes, affordable homes for seniors. In this area of the site, we're really looking to transform the existing gravel parking lot into a sense of place with new homes, open green space, and generous landscaping buffers that would also improve the site's stormwater management. At the bottom of the screen, we have the former police station wing along Westwood Ave, which would be renovated into a mix of professional office spaces, other small businesses such as a fitness center, and a community room for the residents of the apartment building. Along Route 1, the former firehouse will be renovated into 2 retailers with an adjacent patio space overlooking a garden, as well as the relocated Betts Memorial Diner. Lastly, the future phase, which would have its own separate site plan review, is reserved at the top left for a future commercial use. So overall, the tenant mix has largely remained the same, which is really what dictates the traffic and parking demands. Tom will update you on the traffic momentarily, but for now, I'll give you a rundown on the parking. As you may remember, this mixed use project provides the opportunity to apply shared use parking standards, which is explicitly allowed under the TVC and really follows smart growth principles. The process includes tabulating the ordinance required parking demands for each use and then actually analyzing each hour of the day. And what this does is it takes advantage of a scenario, for example, where an office worker who arrives for a 9-to-5 shift takes a parking space, but a resident may actually be out running errands or simply off-site at work. The goal is to use each parking space for as close to 24 hours a day as possible. Jumping into the numbers, for this site, the peak weekend hour, we calculated 73 spaces, and for the peak weekday, we calculated 79. We are proposing within this final site plan 78 dedicated parking spaces, which we anticipate to be more than sufficient given the conservative baseline parking demands. Lastly, in the unlikely event an overflow condition does occur, there is a public parking lot across Fairfield Street next to Amato's, which could provide that overflow. We have also reserved another 8 spaces on site adjacent to the future pad should they become necessary, which is a typical approach in Scarborough. So not only does this plan meet the ordinance, but there are several safety nets and conservative approaches built in, with the overall analysis being fully supported by the third-party engineering review. In addition to the extensive parking analysis since our last meeting in February, we've taken another hard look at the overall site layout and how it interacts with the surrounding street network. And in response to board and staff comments, we have increased the proposed sidewalks extents. Previously, the design only included the full frontage of Route 1. We have since wrapped the sidewalk around the corner, the full frontage of Fairfield, really linking the residential component to Route 1. We have also provided a sidewalk on a portion of Westwood, which would link the professional offices to Route 1. So pleased to further increase the walkability of the site and the neighborhood. Lastly here, you'll notice we've adjusted the driveway design by limiting Fairfield to a one-way in-only condition, as well as slightly altered the Route 1 driveway, really to maintain effective circulation throughout the site. Stepping back at a high level, we are still looking to drastically reduce the site's existing cumulative length of curb cuts, as well as reduce the number of total curb cuts from 7 to 4. So with that, I will hand it off to Tom Errico to dive a little deeper into this analysis, as well as to provide an overview of the traffic. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. Well, good evening. Again, my name is Tom Errico, Senior Traffic Engineer with TY Lin International. Really, the focus of our evaluation has really centered on access and movements into and out of the site. We've been working very closely with town staff and the town's traffic peer reviewer in terms of coming up with a plan that we think is safe and efficient. And really the first, I'll say, part of the focus of the plan was Fairfield Road and concerns about movements exiting Fairfield onto Route 1, particularly the left turn movement. And ultimately we looked at a few different scenarios in terms of how we could manage those movements, through some sort of channelization. This is an example where an island would be constructed in Route 1 that would limit movements to right turn in, right turn out on Fairfield. We deem this not to be appropriate at this time, given impacts to Bangor Savings Bank across the street, and then just general neighborhood impacts for movements out of Fairfield. The next concept we looked at was some sort of channelized island that would restrict movements, again, to right turn out from Fairfield. Again, we deem this not appropriate given impacts to the neighborhood in terms of left turn movements out. And so we discarded that. The third option we looked at was simply placing a sign on the approach from Fairfield to Route 1 and deemed that to really be less effective. And so ultimately we landed on a scenario, in conjunction with town staff and Bill Bray, of an entry only from Fairfield. So that would fundamentally restrict movements, from entering Fairfield and then potentially making the left turn out. I think everybody knows queues do back up from Oak Hill. And so the sense is let's really direct people towards Westwood in terms of exiting the site. And then the second, I'll say access egress location that we spent some time looking at with town staff and Bill was the Route 1 driveway. And again, if you remember, the initial iteration had an entry only, but that was under a scenario where the driveway on Fairfield was two-way and there could be some accessibility not only to Route 1 to the north, but also to that overflow parking. And so we thought a really good way to balance not only the ability to get out of the site in a relatively, I'll say easy way, was to provide a right turn egress movement exiting the site. And this really served a few purposes. One, Sam touched on walkability, livability of the site. We're really trying to minimize on-site circulation so that vehicles that are really trying to get out of the site can do so relatively quickly without circulating through the site and creating the pedestrian vehicle conflict. And two, it provides a little bit easier, I'll say, ability to get to the overflow parking lot. They can exit at that location and then head north and turn right onto Fairfield. So we think we've come up with a plan. Few things that I mentioned in my memo, and I think the town's traffic peer review talked about is wayfinding. We do think a wayfinding signage program makes sense so that anybody that's utilizing the site is directed to Westwood as part of leaving the site. I think my opinion is that just naturally, organically, people will gravitate to Westwood. Anybody that's a frequent user, repeat user, an office worker, I think they'll know the best way to get out of this site is to head to Westwood. That's the safest, least complicated location to exit the site. So we think we're in a pretty good place in terms of our driveway program. And lastly, I would just say that I think it was a comment. I didn't attend the last planning board meeting, but I was told that there was some interest in understanding the trip generation from the site and potential tenants and within the project. And so we conducted a traffic count at Rosemont Market on Route 1 in Falmouth, similar location, to get a sense about what kind of traffic's being generated by that use and how it compared to what we assumed. We used standard Institute of Transportation Engineer trip generation rates, and they're very consistent. The data that we collected at Rosemont and Falmouth is consistent with what we developed and utilized in our assessment, which was a nice thing to see. So quick summary, I think that sort of covers some of the key topics, and I'll turn it over to Jesse.
Thank you all. Here we are today for site plan review. And so we know that we need to focus on site improvements, but we've also made a series of architectural improvements and guided by the board's comments last time. And so what you're looking at here is an image of the entrance to the building, which we think is in a really lovely spot. It faces both Route 1 and it faces the side of the market. And we've made a series of architectural improvements. We've added some fine architectural detail at the top of the building, at the cornice, a clapboard pattern. We've shifted the colors of the building to be a more inviting, a sort of deep russet brown and a terracotta painted base, and then a natural cedar at the entrance. We're showing signage, a name perhaps Firehouse Commons for this building. We've got some benches and some seating arrangements so that you're drawn into a bright, lively entrance per the ordinance. And we've shown landscape improvements over the last time of plantings and trees in this entrance piece. And Sam, if you'll skip ahead a few, we don't need to go into too much detail, but here is the entrance, and you can see this inset entrance, which is very glassy at the building. And one more thing of note is the community room is actually in the old police safety building. So we've reduced the size of this building by moving some of the community functions out of this building and allowed us to reduce our footprint. But you can get to this entrance on foot, by car, by bicycle, and it's visible from the street and above, so you know exactly where you're headed in terms of site plan view. If you go up a level, Sam, it's, again, we mentioned this before, it's 3 stories. It's affordable housing, so this is 55 plus. It means that you can make a maximum of $42,000 a year to meet the median income and the median income rates we're hitting in Scarborough. So that's the income limit that creates this affordability. Next, please. And I think also of note is a major factor in how we've designed this building is to make sure that we can meet Scarborough's sustainability goals. We think this has a chance of being the first net zero multifamily building in Scarborough, but we've designed the building to ensure that we can have a large component of solar panels on the roof that face south. Next, please. And that also, those sloping roofs that face south also allow us to bring the roof height down so that the roof is low and we have a single family neighborhood next to this building and keeps the height as low as possible. Next, please. View from on Fairfield and from the neighboring side. And next image. But I think importantly, we've taken a good look at the architectural components and the design components. And you can see that we have a decorative cornice. We have a gray clapboard, which has a pattern of a 3 narrow and 1 wide, 3 narrow, 1 wide, which is a very traditional New England pattern. At the entrance to the building, we have a touch of natural wood with main materials. It's an eastern white cedar with a subtle stain on it. Again, using local materials and evoking our own heritage. And next image. Here's a detail of the cornice. This building tries to hold to the base, middle, top traditional New England forms. And so there's a base component, and up at the top there is a decorative cornice with some detail. And we wanted to show the board some additional detail on how this is going to be a well-constructed building, and it's going to have some really fine details to it. And here's an example of a similar palette of materials on another building we've done, showing these apartments should be very bright and light-filled, tall, narrow windows similar to a traditional New England window form. And on the left is an example of that clapboard pattern that we've used successfully in other buildings to add a little detail and a little extra touch of architecture to a building that has to also be built incredibly affordably. And then last image, just showing this all in context, that we think we're making a welcoming entrance, a nice sense of place, and really hope to be a good addition to the neighborhood here. So I think we didn't want to dwell too much since this is a site plan review focused meeting, but we can talk in as much detail as the board needs during question time. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all for the team. Yeah, great. I'm going to turn this over for public comment. If there are members here of the public that would like to speak on this, please raise your hand and I will have you buzzed in, so to speak. Mike Violin, I see, has a hand up. All right. Mike, can you unmute yourself?
There we go. That better?
Great. Yeah, and just as a reminder, we're going to ask you to keep comments to 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I'll try my best to not use it all. I'm at 8 Fairfield. The comments that I have as far as the building goes, I'll probably leave to Jenny. I'm going to guess that Jenny's going to say something. She's the one who's closest to it. The comments I have today are going to focus around traffic, parking, etc. The first thing is, I understand you say there's a public lot there. I don't think you can rely on that. I don't think that you should be banking on the fact that that's there. As somebody who's lived at Fairfield for 8+ years now, I can tell you that the Amato's lot, especially in the winter, is half a lot. I would think for us to allow that to be part of the consideration as justification for lack of parking spaces across the street where the property is, I think is a mistake. Parking on the street. So the sidewalks are going to go all the way around, or I won't say all the way around, but it seemed like they're going from at least the property lines on Westwood and around to Fairfield. That's going to push, when the parking is not there, people out onto the streets. It was a concern that we had referenced last time when we spoke. People on the street spoke. I didn't hear any reference as to off-street parking. The street in and of itself is narrow. If you have any vehicles there, it's going to cause problems. The study that you had with Falmouth and Rosemont, I don't think those are apples. I think those are apples and oranges. There's a huge series of traffic lights there to control traffic. You don't have that flow here. So the frequency, I think, as a matter of fact, I think it hurts your argument more than it helps. And the traffic studies that were done, were they done during this pandemic? Because it would seem like car numbers would be down now everywhere. I think it's not a good representation, ideally, of what you're trying to arrive at. So those are questions. I realize one of the flaws in this process is we can make comments, but we never hear any of the answers per se. One of the other things that I don't like with the process is I hear a lot of references last time and this time to staff comments. Well, we don't know what the questions were and we don't know what the comments are. So it's hard for us to pass judgment on what's being said and what's being asked. So we don't necessarily get the complete picture. So I appreciate the time, and I'll yield to whoever's next. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. I'll quickly just Jay, can you clarify for us real quick, staff comments, are those part of the online? Do they ever get out online?
Those are not posted online, but they are part of the public record on file in the town office. We're trying to figure out how best to utilize our online agendas and working with IT. But at this time, no.
All right, I think that's probably a good note to make for the future. Jenny, I see you have a hand up. Jenny Pillsbury.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Hi, Jenny.
Great. Hi. Thanks for giving me this time. I'm Jenny Pillsbury at 13 Fairfield Road. So I'm the home right next to the building. So obviously this is of huge importance to my family. We love our home. We love our street. We love our neighborhood. So this is a really big deal for us. The building, to me, I appreciate you guys coming at it and using a lot of, I know you said Maine materials and New England windows and all those great things, but to me, it looks very industrial. It looks like maybe it's a building in Portland on a college campus versus in our neighborhood that lives in our neighborhood with us. That's a really big deal because for me, it's all I'm going to see out my backyard or out my side windows when and I know for my neighbors across the street, that's all that they will see. So we want to look at something that looks like it belongs in Portland on a college campus. It looks like maybe you made some changes from the last time we met, but still looks very industrial to me and not like that it lives in Scarborough in our small town. The parking is a big issue for me. I know you've got 78 spots and that's more than what you had to do, but it's a huge concern. Using the Amato's overflow, which I know is the city parking lot, I don't think is a good option. That I shouldn't, when planning a business, say, well, I'm going to use the city's overflow parking, as part of my plan for when there's a problem. There will be a problem. I mean, traffic here is crazy, parking's crazy. The Amato's lot is already full all the time from just the Amato's customers. And I didn't quite understand. I understood what you were saying about traffic from the things that didn't work, which were unfortunate. Possibly the median strip in the middle of the road, I think, would help deter people, but that wouldn't work. So I got all the things that didn't work, but I'm guessing the thing that you said did work was to take a right onto Fairfield and then enter the facility, the complex from that way, and then exit out onto Westwood so nobody would exit down Fairfield is my guess, which would be great if we didn't have a ton of traffic because we all have children who ride bikes and play ball and baseball in the street. And it's very much a game on kind of thing for the kids playing in the street. And because we don't have a huge amount of traffic now that comes down our street, just the people that cut through to Black Point. So, we're really nervous that people are going to park in front of our homes because that wouldn't be pleasant or, anything that we want. So, a lot of big changes for us. We're all pretty upset, and we hope you take our thoughts into consideration as we are current taxpayers. This neighborhood's been here a very long time, and we'd all like to continue to live here because we could sell our homes right now for a great sum of money, but we can't buy anything else in Scarborough. There's just nothing available. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. I appreciate it. Is there anyone else here from the public that wishes to speak? All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment. Board members, Roger, do you want to start this one off?
Sure. First, I want to commend everybody for the work they've done on the traffic. This is going to be a challenge from the get-go, and I think you've done a pretty decent job. As long as I guess just regarding the traffic, the Route 1, that the right turn only out, you can make that island large enough so it will deter people from trying to turn to head south from Route 1.
Roger, this is Tom. Yes, that's the intent, that geometrically and also material wise, we're going to make it difficult. I mean, again, like I said previously, my sense is that, the office worker, the employee, the resident of the housing, the person that's there daily will know not to try to make that left turn. They'll get to Westwood. Westwood's the best place to make the left turn out. So I think, again, naturally, I think it'll happen, but we're gonna geometrically, as shown and with material, some physical curbing material, make it difficult.
Okay. I'm pretty satisfied that you've done the best you can do regarding the traffic. I do think that maybe some signage on Westbrook, on Fairfield, to make sure that there's no parking on the street. I guess that would be the town's responsibility. And I think that's something that should be done properly, just to make sure that that's understood by everybody. I would like to talk to you about the housing. And I'm looking in particular, I raised the question at the last time you before the board that I had some questions about the architecture of the building, where I did see the property on in Portland. I forget the name of the street that you have it in Portland, but I did go by that, and it's an attractive building in Portland. How is this one different right now than what you showed us, what you presented to us previously? Because I let me just preface that. I think I like the brown, the color of the brown, and the additional, architectural components to the trim and everything. But it seemed to me, I recall the first time you presented it to us, wasn't it all gray? The building all gray for the most part.
Should we answer to staff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Asking.
Yeah, originally it was a white and a cream. And so after talking inside the team, we felt that the gray with the terracotta was a much better fit. And the other pieces that making sure that we represented the true detail of the cornice and the detail around the edge and around the windows was something that we didn't really show last time. So we really wanted to show that in a lot more detail.
Okay, the photo that you have up on the screen right now, that's the entryway. I'm
Correct.
looking at your elevations, and I'm looking at the one that has the east and the south elevations. And I don't believe you have a color. You don't have that in color.
Correct. Yes, it's really the lines of the drawing.
That one there, okay?
Yeah.
Now the bottom one is the elevation that will be seen by the Pillsbury's.
Correct, but we're not really showing the tree buffer because we need.
That's what I was going to ask you about, because
yeah,
on your landscaping plans, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
You got 21 Norway spruces there. The thing is, they only grow 6 feet high, according to the. I believe that's right. Is that what they're going to be when you put them in? Do you know how tall those will actually get?
That's what they'll be when they go in.
Yeah.
I don't have the full mature height off the top of my head, but the 6 feet reference is how tall they would be when they go in the ground.
Okay.
The Norway spruce get really tall. Roger. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We didn't want to show trees covering the building to hide the building because we didn't want to pretend the building, so we showed on the site plan, but not on the elevation, I think is appropriate.
So initially they would pretty much cover the first floor of the building. And ultimately they will at least get probably halfway up the second story. Is that correct?
Yeah, they usually grow to about 40 to 60 feet tall, and Norway spruce are tall.
Oh, they do? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll conceal, Roger, I'll just speak to those because I've planted those in the past. They will grow taller than the building.
Oh, they will? Okay.
Yes.
But that's going to be a lot of, now, do they have a full growth all the way up, or is it just at the top?
So they actually conceal all. So some of the lower branches may fall off, but there is concealment for the majority of the tree, of the canopy.
Okay, so that will basically buffer that whole building from the homes next door then, on the
That's
south
absolutely the
side at
goal.
least.
That was the intention.
Okay. My last question is, I'm just kind of curious on Bet's Diner. When you checked, did you get any comments from the public on that at all? I suspect most of the public they have no clue what that is even there.
So, yeah, so we haven't, they haven't had a dialogue with members of the public on the Bet's Diner. It's mostly been with planning staff and being respectful for what the memorial stands for and making sure that we create a nice location for it. So, you know, we're obviously open to that discussion. It just hasn't arisen.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that would be probably a nice little area to have some outdoor, you know, when people are going to be walking up, possibly walking to this site from Easton Village, as well as maybe even Bessie Commons, if they can get there. And that, you know, they get there and they may want a sandwich or something. It'd be a nice place to have some eating outside there, but there just wouldn't, I mean, just stone stools.
No, actually, Roger, we don't have a detail of that, but I think today, I'm not sure if we do or not, but that is the intention again, is to actually have some seating around the Bet's Memorial Diner and possibly a flagpole with a flag there. So, and maybe some shade tree as well. So to make a comfortable spot for people to, if they're taking a sandwich from either Harbor Fish or Amato's or from Rosemont, any of the locations to walk across and use that memorial. So it's open to the public.
Okay, I think that's all I have. I just think you've done a pretty decent job, and as long as we can take care of the abutters and provide them with some adequate buffering and make sure the traffic is not too severe or severe at all, or even burdensome. So good luck.
Thanks, Roger. Rick Meinking?
Sure. Yeah, you've done quite a job in trying to figure out the traffic, and you have 3 in and 3 out, and it seems like it makes some sense. Signage and of course, that's going to be a key to get folks used to the traffic pattern in this area. But I think you've done a good job in trying to come up with the best solution for the traffic heading out onto Route 1. I like the building a lot. You mentioned it might be the first net zero, and I think you're saying that in terms of the energy. But I'd just be curious if it's going to be net carbon, meaning you're not going to have combustion going on inside that facility. Is that your plans?
Rick, that is that's what we're striving for, is all electric buildings, so that as the solar panel in this building and as more solar panel comes online, that this could be absolutely, that's the goal.
That's excellent. That kind of follows with where the state is trying to drive construction these days. I think it's a great looking building, and I don't really, you've been before us before. I don't have anything else to add. I think the buffering has really made a difference in how it's going to look from the abutters as well as from Route 1. I think it's going to be an attractive location here in downtown Scarborough. So I applaud you on that. I also want to thank you for putting in at least the conduit for a charger. I hope that you will find that you'll end up putting the charger in while you're doing all the construction, because GMC is not going to make any gasoline vehicles after 2035. So we're going to need chargers big time. That's all I have, Nick.
Thanks, Rick. Rachel?
Sure. I have a list. First of all, I do appreciate the changes that have been made. I think there's a real attempt to bring a unity to the development and to create a New England vernacular in the new building, in the residential building. I do have a list of questions that I would like addressed. They don't have to be addressed at this meeting, but certainly when you come back for the next level of approval, there are things that I will be looking at. First of all, in terms of the overflow parking and wayfaring, as you put up the wayfaring throughout the development, you are going to have to be careful to direct people to the overflow parking. And because of the in-only driveway on Fairfield, that does mean that people are going to have to get out onto Route 1 and then go up Fairfield and into that parking lot. That's going to be confusing for people who are already in the development and they've circled around a couple of times and are trying to contemplate leaving because they can't find parking or see a sign that says overflow this way. So it's not going to be immediately easy to address that issue with wayfaring, but I think it's doable. One of the issues that was brought up tonight by an abutter was the concern that the overflow parking is full. I've not been there past it when I've seen it full. However, as parking lots go, I don't recall it being very well surfaced, striped, or anything else. And if the concern is that the snow is not removed in the winter, so that half of the spaces are all of a sudden gone, that's an issue that's going to need to be addressed between this development and the town. So I would suggest that you work with the town on what that overflow parking lot might look like, any signage that might say overflow, firehouse overflow parking this way. And I think that is a reasonable resolution to the concern about the number of parking spaces. I have no problem with the concept of the shared spaces. I think the more successful the whole development becomes, though, the more people are going to be there, and that overflow parking lot is going to become very important. This is a multi-building development, and that means that what you have is a focal building, which I think you've rightly assumed is going to be the Rosemont and Harbor Fish building, the old firehouse. I look at the drawing, the artist's rendering that you have up there, and I noticed on the plans, one of the things you had indicated is that they would either be overhead doors or shop windows, storefront windows. By our codes, we do not have overhead doors facing the streets. Each time that happens, we get into a long discussion with car dealers. So that what I see here in the visuals works very well. But because this is the focal building, some of the elements of that need to be reflected in the Avesta housing. And those are the divided windows, which really we don't have in the Avesta housing. And divided windows, the mullions, are an element of the New England vernacular. So I would suggest you take a look at the entranceway to Avesta and see if those windows perhaps should be reflective of the same windows that we have here in the Rosemont and the Harbor Fish. I would also suggest to tie the buildings together is the development that as you come forward next, you consider planters that are same for all of the entrances and exits of the development that are a way to tie the buildings together. And any trim. This looks like you've got a white trim or an off-white. And I know for the police station, you have a section of wooden facing there that you say is going to be painted in accordance with the wishes of the the developer, of the, excuse me, the tenants. But really, it's up to the developer to have a consistent paint color tying in all of the buildings. So take a look at how that can be done with Avesta, with the Rosemont Market here, and with the with some of the facings or the trim on the police station. I have some questions about Rosemont Market. The grocery stores I'm familiar with, I have grocery carts. I don't know if they're planning on having any grocery carts at all. If they are, you're going to have to make arrangements. Jack, I see you shaking your head no, so there will be none. So none will be taken up by, no grocery carts will not take up a parking space, you're saying. Thank you for nodding your head at me. That's very good. I also have a question for the seating area at the exit to the deli or the dining area for the Rosemont Market that was on the plans. Usually when markets put out, yes, correct, right there. Usually when markets put chairs out or tables out, they expect those to be occupied by customers and not just folks who walk by. So there needs to be some clarity as to whether that seating is going to be available for everybody or whether it really is just tied to the market. So some indication of that would be helpful. Let me look at my list and see what else I have. I've got the mullions, I've got the planters, I've got the color, the overhead doors. You had indicated an overhead door. Actually, two of them on the police station. Since they are not facing the street, that's okay. But for the Rosemont Market, if you were thinking about overhead doors, again, that's a problem with the design. And I think that's what I have. So I appreciate the work that you've done, the cornices. Sometimes corner boards can be used to break up the mass of a building. I think you need to take a look again at the paint simply because you're going to need to find a way to harmonize that building with the rest of the development, and paint is a good way to do that. And that's what I'm going to be looking for when you come forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. So my colleagues did a nice job covering some of the concerns. I'll just highlight a few of mine. The overflow parking area identified across the street. Again, I know every project that we want to see here really should be contained to handle itself. And at this point, there seems to be a gesture that you're not relying on the overflow parking, but just pointing out that it's there and available. But again, it has no real maintenance plan associated with your project, and you have no control over the use of that space across the street now or in the future, whether that gets developed as well or turned into something else or privatized it somehow. So my big concern here is the parking now and in the future, and I don't want to see another example of a Nonesuch River Brewing where we thought it would be popular and we thought it would be utilized, and they came in with a minimum, and kind of the worst fears were realized. And I think, deep down, we all hope the same for your project. We hope these businesses are successful. And if they are, to the extent that some of the other projects in town have been, then you will have a parking problem. And so that's always going to be the concern. And it's part of that is from lessons learned in the past and what we've looked at here. Just looking at the residential side of this, if those residents do have a car each, they're going to occupy that back portion. Friends, guests, or other residents are going to look for parking at the nearest available space. And do they start consuming some of the commercial spots you kind of have, quote unquote, reserved in front of the building? Because currently the ones that are in front of the commercial building would be the closest walking path for those people to get to the residential. So are you going to accidentally create a conflict between your commercial tenants and the residents if a car is left in front of their store overnight? So I think those are things that just you need to weigh in a little bit. And I see you have 8 spaces on site, kind of shaded in gray for maybe future. And I'm wondering if the future really isn't now, and just to avoid those potential conflicts. The other aspects, as far as concerns for your butters on Fairfield and Westwood, and I'm not sure this might be a more appropriate question for staff as to whether or not some no parking signs can be put on. And I'm sure the police department has to weigh in on that, perhaps, or code enforcement. But whether or not that would be appropriate, not necessarily around where the current property lines are, but more so where the residential neighborhood starts. So if there was a way to separate and protect the residential abutters from having to deal with a lot of overflow parking on their street, if it ever came to it, I think that would be a good step. And I'm not sure who would lead that effort, but I think it's worthwhile to look at and consider. As far as the Route 1 in and out, I think it's reasonable. I have concerns on the left turn out of Westwood, because we all know how backed up that can be, and whether or not somewhere down the line there'd be a signal required, and I'm not sure exactly what triggers that. And maybe Angela or Jay could help. I mean, is it the number of trips? Do we look at how this functions 2 years from now and find out that it's quote unquote failing, and that triggers another step? But I just want to make sure that we're also not setting ourselves up for more and more problems out of the site. I think it's got a lot of good potential. I think the designs you put forth are nice, and I think they'll add a lot compared to what's there. So but I think you have a little bit more work to do and a little bit more thought, especially surrounding the parking. That probably be my main concern. So
I'd like to take a second to respond to some of that, if I may.
Sure.
So a lot of the comments were very similar, had to do with traffic and parking for the most part. So I just want to be clear. I mean, we're not counting the overflow parking in part of our calculations as a requirement for the site. In fact, since the beginning of time when we started this development and through now, we've been very thoughtful about who we have been speaking to for tenancies in this building. Rosemont and Harborfish have signed agreements with us and have all the intention of moving forward with 75% of the fire station that you're seeing on this elevation. They've got, as a result of talking with them, Nick, you had brought up a comment relative to people from the residential building parking in front of the commercial building that we're looking at. And what we're planning to do is actually have signs on those spaces that are 30-minute signs. And that was both amenable to us as the development team, as well as and basically presented by those tenants, because they don't anticipate on having anybody in the building for a very long period of time. It's not a sit-down restaurant situation. So that's kind of a positive there. We're not, I don't think there's any intention right now as far as trying to direct people to the overflow parking lot. As I said, we're not really considering that at this point in time. We have plenty of parking. As it relates to the tenancy, the mixed use that we have here is very much in agreement with the town's shared parking arrangement, whereby the gym, which occupies a fairly substantial portion of the police station, is its biggest part of business is during the day and prior hours to when Rosemont and Harborfish would have their peak demand, which is around 5:30. And so, those spaces are shared, in addition to the, potentially the residents having a much different schedule from the professional office building, which is what we're referring to as the former police station. And so some of the tenants we've been also talking to that we don't have commitments from yet, but that we expect to be very similar, whether these come forward or the next do, are more like small financial business offices and the like. And because of what Jesse said, where we're putting the community building into the police station, we've given away kind of leasable space inside the police station, a fairly substantial portion, 800 square feet, to be able to not have the Avesta building be larger than we needed it to be because we had that space. And so that space, again, just don't forget, that means that's, another suite, another potential office suite that's not going to be used in that manner. In addition to that, it provides a space inside the facility for the residents of the surrounding community as well. So anybody in this neighborhood, not just in our development, but anybody in the neighborhood would have the ability to utilize that community room for their use through scheduling through Avesta. On the overhead doors facing the street, the original intent was to emulate this rendering with black, fully glazed overhead doors. And the reason for that was to, kind of add to the original ambiance of the fire station and preserve that kind of that value of the existing building. If the planning board, if we can't go that route and aluminum storefront glazing is the way to go based on the code, that's completely fine, because Rosemont and Harbor Fish can't open the doors anyway because they can't have, flies, and they can't be outdoor space. So the intention was never to open those doors anyway. It was just to provide kind of that original ambiance of the fire station, preserve that history. But we're completely fine with aluminum storefront and would be more than happy to proceed in that direction. The overhead doors inside the site, there was a comment, I think it was a staff comment on the police station facing east, I believe, facing Fairfield, that it looked like one of the old doors for where the gym is going to be was going to be original. And in fact, we've made a decision, or hope to make a decision with the with the planning board, that those doors would all have the very same ambiance of a black frame glazed storefront type look, so that it preserves kind of the overall architecture of all the buildings surrounding. The entrance to the police station relative to colors and consistency throughout the site is something we have paid close attention to. The reason why we have chosen to kind of keep it somewhat vague at this point in terms of what we will be using is because of how much kind of scrutiny there's been around the Avesta building. And so we didn't want to show something too definitive that was going to be in juxtaposition to what we were going to do with the Avesta project. So we're looking to get approval in this as a whole and kind of tie those buildings together. And we wanted to show intent, not exact direction. I think we already answered the grocery cart question. The outdoor seating, in terms of who is going to sit there, the intention with the plaza, first of all, the seating area is actually not adjacent to where Rosemont and Harbor Fish will be. So they take up where you see on the elevation that you're looking at, their tenancy ends where it says eatery. And so that last overhead bay and that space to the left is still vacant space for a tenant. We don't know who yet or what type of use. But that outdoor plaza was intended to be used for common area as a common area element, not specific to Rosemont, Harbor Fish, or whatever else goes in that space. So it could be used by the public, anybody coming. Our hope with that part of the site is that it's an inviting space for people off the Eastern Trailway to be able to bike, come over here, grab a coffee and a sandwich, sit outside, and have a pleasant, experience. The overhead doors, and I think answered some of the cars and questions. So I just wanted to point that out because I didn't really have a chance to kind of talk about the existing buildings that much earlier in this presentation, and just want to say that we have put a tremendous amount of thought into all these comments previous to this meeting, and apologize if it didn't come through in the presentation.
Yeah, and just one more clarification on the parking, Tim, is the 79 peak demand that is literally for a couple hours of the week. So that's what the shared use process makes us evaluate. So the 78 that we provide on site, I mean, that is meeting the absolute peak for those couple hours. Every other hour of the week, we're actually overparked. In addition to that, we used the ordinance requirement baselines, which are actually very conservative. If you were to compare them to the hundreds of data pieces that we have from the ITE, the ordinance is very conservative. And just to give you an idea of what a Vesta would actually require, their parking ratio is actually closer to 1 space for 2 units compared to the 1-to-1 that we used. So there really has been a lot of conservative safety nets put into this, in addition to these 8 parking spaces that we could build if necessary. So really, I just want to reiterate, the overflow parking spaces have absolutely no bearing on our requirement or our proposal. And if that parking lot wasn't there, I don't think our site would even change. We're meeting everything on site.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Tim.
Nick, can I just ask a clarifying question, if you don't mind?
Absolutely, go for it.
Yep. So I think it might be helpful to hear from the applicant in terms of their parking needs, because one of the things that where this site is unique in some ways is that we have the existing building that they're looking to occupy. We have sort of the known Vesta building, as we're calling it, and then there's sort of an undefined commercial pad, which we've talked about a bank in the past, and I think that's what the most of the analysis is based on. But as we talk through the parking needs, I guess it'd just be interesting to know as I recall seeing I'm just trying to pull up the numbers. I think it was the 78 parking spaces. Is that based on full build out, including the build out of the bank space, or I guess I call it the undefined commercial space, and something that would be frankly subject to further review when that proposal comes forward and the details are available. And I guess where I'm headed with that is it seems like it's almost that there's a future condition that's being overbuilt for in the short term, that the board would have benefit of review at that time of saying what's happening on site. And so I just pose that as a question to the applicant to help me and potentially others understand what is being represented by the 78 parking spaces that are being built out at the outset of the project.
Yes, so the peak range is 73 to 79, and that's based on our proposed uses that we are seeking approval for tonight. That does not include the future bank. What we show is 78 parking spaces with the possibility of up to 86. And once those final tenants are in there, and we go through the condition of approval that talks about the trip generation and that reporting, we'll have a better sense of a better idea of what's left for parking and what an appropriate use would be at that commercial site. And this approach has been fully supported by the third-party traffic reviewer, and we feel very comfortable, both from the ordinance perspective and from a business perspective, that this is a solid and sound approach.
So just Jay, to answer your question directly, absolutely, we would have to come back to the board for approval if something was built on that site, that pad site in the future. So that's not part of this equation. We'd have to come back one more time for approval.
So for depending on how the board feels about that issue, staff has drafted a motion for your consideration that has conditions that sort of lay out that the future Vesta building, depending on where the board is in your consideration of that, could come back for final site plan approval. Any future development of the commercial pad certainly would require future site plan approval because we don't know the building or the use exactly yet. So that's pretty clear. And that would, because if I'm understanding the conversation thus far, and certainly look to the board to correct me if I go astray, it feels like there's some coalescing around the traffic access, while there's still some areas of some areas to just sort of iron out in terms of wayfinding and those sorts of things. There's general agreement on the approach with respect to activation of the existing public safety building. And so if the board sort of at that point, at that stage of review, staff's, like I said, developed the draft motion, when you're ready to see it, that would sort of enable the current building to get going and still have further review of the other elements as the board sees necessary.
Thanks, Jack. Roger?
Yeah, a couple of questions. On the wayfaring signs, is that something, Jay Jamel, that the staff would approve of, or who approves that? I mean, I think that's basically beyond our scope in a way.
I can jump in if you want. I think that would be something that the board would review, just because it's kind of like a campus directory signage. But if the board was comfortable, it could be a condition where staff would review and approve it as well. It's up to you guys.
Yeah, okay, and the other thing, and I apologize for asking this question because I think Rachel brought it up, and I might have been just going out to get a glass of water. On the overhead doors in the front of the building, I personally, I like the way they look in the design. I think they have a lot of character, and the building looks very attractive the way it's envisioned right on the screen right now. And I personally, I would not want to see a very generic window, just, arrangement there. I think this looks really nice. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in regarding that, if that becomes an issue.
Roger, that is our intention.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Let me ask you this then, Nick. So the delay is because of the series of questions that Rachel has, or can those be satisfied by staff, or?
Well, I think it's the comfort level of, do we feel like are they at least kind of in a preliminary way? What we're looking at is pretty much what we'll see, knowing that they've got a little bit more homework to do, and we would see it on the next round.
So can I chime in for a moment, Chair Nick? So I believe this is our 4th time to planning board, including sketch review. And so I'm hopeful that if there are outstanding issues, that they can be conditions of approval at the staff level that we could work through. If they're not, essentially, if we've addressed sort of the major issues, so to speak, and if you're comfortable with those major issues, if there are some outstanding issues, and hopefully we can address those with staff and get those approved. So if there was like a list of condition of approvals, our concern, and I'll be quite blunt, is that we have tenants that actually have a lease time frame that they need to get into the space, and our concern, and it's not your concern, it's our concern, admittedly, but it's obviously to obtain permits that we can move forward with this. And assuming staff is comfortable with those conditions, that we could work through with them. But again, our hope is to be able to work through those issues with staff if there are outstanding issues, if they're not the major issues, and then to obtain permits in the relatively near future, especially for the existing buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Board, Jay, I don't know if it's appropriate to throw up I want to gauge the board before we get into it. Are we feeling like we're relatively comfortable with what we're seeing, knowing that we will have another stab at this? Roger?
I'm happy to share the condition, the draft motion, but I think more particularly is usually the conditions that the board's fairly interested in. I'm happy to share that. The board would like to see those. Again, the way coming into the meeting, recognizing sort of what was left on staff's memo and comments, and based on the prior discussion, the memo, or I'm sorry, the draft motion is really aimed around, it pivots around the activation of the existing building. I think I've already mentioned this, and sort of with the recognition that the future buildings still might require some additional review and approval by the board, i.e. the Avesta building. Again, I look for the board for clarity on that. And the, as I think I already said, the existing commercial site. So if you'd like, I'm happy to share this whenever you would like or not.
For what it's worth, I have no problem with the existing spaces and having them begin that process. As far as the comments that were related to the Avesta building, Jay, were you saying that there might be a future separate site plan approval process for that building itself?
If that's what the board, the board feels that there's more review to the Avesta building, that would certainly be one way the board could approach it. Again, it's sort of bifurcating the approvals because we have multiple buildings,
right.
And so.
At a minimum, I'm just so the board knows where I am. At a minimum, I'm fine with the repurposing of the existing buildings. Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, when the applicant first came before us, the big issues were the traffic and the egress and access, and then the other big issue was the Vesta building and the architecture and the buffering. Now, from my perspective, they've done a terrific job with the buffering. I think the architecture has been improved on that as well. I think they've done an excellent job, based on the space they're working with, trying to deal with the traffic concerns. And they're abiding by the ordinance when it comes to the parking, the internal parking. So, it's interesting. I've had people approach me saying, this is a pretty exciting project. I mean, people don't normally come up to me and say something like that. And so I just, I don't want to beat this like a dead horse. I mean, I think they pretty much satisfied our concerns. And and they're going to have to come back. I really question whether they go with the bank with what they want to do because of the amount of traffic that's going to generate, but we'll see when that comes up. But that's a future consideration. So I'm ready to move on with this.
Thanks, Roger. Rachel or Rick, got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm satisfied. I'm mostly satisfied with the firehouse and the police station. I'm queasy about the traffic, but I don't think there's any more that can be done about that. I think it's quite possible the overflow parking is going to be needed, but we can wait and see if that's going to happen. The only sort of minor tweaks and concerns that I have are those elements that would tie all of the buildings in the site together. And actually, I think by approving the firehouse and the police station, the developer's going to have to make a decision about colors and planters and mullions of the windows and how that's going to be. And then Avesta is going to have to come along with that in order to remain harmonious with the rest of the development. So other than saying, hey, we're going to have some planters there, that's about, I'm in good shape on that.
Thanks, Rachel. Rick?
Yeah, I think I'm landing where Roger is. The existing building is a commercial building. There's no question about it, and it's got its characteristics, and we're going to put in a residential looking facility that, is different. I'm not too hung up that they all have to be interconnected and look alike. I think they're unique in their own way. And I don't really think what another round is going to do that I could bring to the table. I believe the staff have the ability to fine tune anything that needs to be done, but I'm landing out where, let's move forward. I think this is a great project for Scarborough. It's going to have some great initiatives put into the buildings that I think can be showcased in the town. And I'm just ready to move forward.
Okay. So I think that said, Jay. You're on mute, Jay, if you're trying to talk to us.
I am trying to talk to you. Thank you very much. I think I muted myself. Would you like me to share the motion?
Please.
All right, let me put that there. Put that there. Why did you do that? Are you seeing a motion right now or a Word
Yep.
document?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Do you need me to make it bigger? Or?
Nope, I'm good now.
All right.
I move to approve the site plan approval. Oops, it's gone
I'm
now.
not sure what I did. Hang on.
That was
sorry.
it.
Sorry. Hang on. All right.
I move to approve the site plan approval project titled Firehouse Village redevelopment as depicted on the plan set prepared by Acorn Engineering, Inc., dated 3/2/21 with the following findings, waivers, and conditions. Findings: the applicant is proposing to renovate the existing former public safety buildings, a multifamily structure for senior affordable housing, provide a commercial pad site for future use, and modify the parking, internal vehicular circulation, and access for the site. Property is located at 246 US Route 1 and will utilize existing frontage. The project is located within the town and village centers, TVC zoning district, and is further identified on the town's assessor's map as map U43 lot 56. Planning board has reviewed the application and supporting documentation and finds that the proposed design of the site plan adequately addresses the site plan review and zoning ordinance requirements for site utilization and layout, access, internal vehicular movement, parking, pedestrian ways, landscaping, stormwater management, lighting, architecture, signage, utilities, and storage. Site plan review standards adequately address the review criteria in accordance with Title 30-A, Section 4402, subsection 6, with respect to the municipal review authority. Waivers: 1, permit the proposed driveway separation along Westwood Avenue of approximately 65 feet. 2, permit the proposed driveway width along Westwood Avenue of approximately 20 feet. 3, permit the 24-foot wide parking aisle width. Conditions: 1, the planning board has determined that it is clearly demonstrated that the proposed shared parking facility will substantially meet the intent of the parking requirements by reason of variation in the probability time of maximum use by patrons and employees in accordance with section 18.A.G.8 in the zoning ordinance. Build out of the remaining commercial pad will require further consideration of the required parking. 2, the proposed commercial pad site and the 31-unit senior affordable housing apartment building on the site will be required to receive further site plan approval by the planning board prior to receiving a building permit. 3, prior to the issuance of any building permit for the site, the applicant shall revise the plan set to include: A, modify the design of the right-out only driveway along Route 1 as noted in the traffic peer review memorandum from Traffic Solutions to be approved by staff. B, modify the design of the overhead door along the eastern elevation of the former police station as noted in the staff review memo dated 4/5/21. C, narrow the enter-only driveway along Fairfield Road as approved by staff. D, additional seating areas adjacent to the western entrance to the former police building. E, regrade and pave the southerly driveway along Westwood Avenue as noted in the staff review memo dated 4/5/21. F, ensure that Betts Memorial plaque, not plague, J, is relocated in proximity to the granite stools. This shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department. 4, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall: A, provide approval from the Portland Water District, B, provide approval by the Scarborough Sanitary District, C, pay the traffic impact fees. D, address the remaining comments in the Woodard and Curran civil peer review memorandum. E, address the remaining comments to the Traffic Solutions peer review memorandum. F, provide a wayfinding signage plan for the project. This shall be approved, reviewed and approved by the planning department. 5, prior to the issuance of a building permit for each tenant fit up, the applicant shall provide updated trip generation numbers for review and approval by the planning department. If the trip total exceeds the approved volumes for the peak hour, a revised traffic analysis is to be completed and any necessary state permits secured and or off-site improvements identified in the analysis will need to be completed as approved by the town prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. This shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department. 6, prior to the issuance of a sign permit, the applicant shall submit a signage plan for review. 7, prior to the start of construction, a pre-construction meeting is required. Meeting shall include appropriate town staff, the developer, and their site contractor, and is to be coordinated through the planning department. That's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. We'll have some discussion. Jay, I've got a quick question.
Sure.
Number 5, and then I'm gonna have you scroll up afterwards, but on number 5, and you have to remember, I'm reading this and thinking about it at the same time, which can be dangerous. It says state permits secured and or offsite improvements identified in the analysis will need to be completed as approved by the town prior to the. So, but right above it though, it was talking about if trip totals exceeds approved volumes for peak hour. It sounds to me like they would already have a certificate of occupancy if we were to determine that they were operating at peak hour. Am I mistaken about that?
Yep, I'm going to ask Jamel or Angela if they have insight on this one. This is, I'm also trying to give it a read here.
So this one came from our traffic peer reviewer, just because the tenants were unknown in the retail space. But I agreed at the end there, we would know, they would have COs because the traffic volumes would be reflected with that. So I'm not sure what else we could add there.
Right. Glad to see my brain works while I read. It's nice.
Yep. Thank you for picking up on that.
Would I just added a few words that sort of mention if during review the trip total exceeds? So again, because we're asking them to submit, so we're going to review it, and if they're exceeding that, that would be the trigger. Does that work for folks?
I guess if you read the start of the sentence, prior to the issuance of a building permit for each tenant fit up.
Yeah.
So you could have partial occupancy on site, find out that your trip generation has maxed it. And I think what you're trying to say is those other tenant fit ups would be subject to other approvals before a CO is issued.
Yeah, I think when the tenants are known, we would like to see the analysis just to make sure they reflect what was approved by you guys.
Okay, I see. And maybe the key was in that first sentence, prior to the issuance of a building permit for each tenant fit up. So, I mean, you could be 75% built out tenant wise in there. The last one comes along and you go, wait, hold it. You've exceeded your trip generation. Go get your permits and then we'll get you your last tenant in there. That's the gist of it, right?
Right.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, so it's only hemming themselves in. They need to be aware that as they move forward in getting getting tenants in there and kind of plan that ahead so they don't paint themselves in a corner with that respect. But then, as you know, you're dwindling down your numbers and your trips. You can plan ahead and start either coming back to the board or going, like you said, to get those state permits.
Okay. And then, Jake, could you scroll up a little bit to, I thought I caught something else and it might take me a second, folks. I'm sorry, this is discussion. So, Roger, you got something to add while I sift around?
It's regarding the parking. If you keep going up, where the word substantial was used. So, yeah, will substantially meet. How do you define substantially?
That language was pulled directly out of the zoning ordinance.
Oh, okay.
So that's for the planning board to determine, have they substantially met it? So, I
mean,
if you would like, it could be struck here because the board is finding that they've met it. But as Jamel said, it's the language in the zoning ordinance that's left to the judgment of the planning board based on the evidence provided to you.
Seems to me they either meet it or they don't.
Are you proposing an amendment to delete the word substantially?
What do you think, Nick?
I mean, it seems like a pretty definitive statement the way it's written. We suspect it will meet the.
I mean, substantially is what? One more, one. I don't know. All right, if everybody's satisfied with it, I don't know.
Okay, and and Jay, can you scroll down a little bit more, because I just want to double check. Maybe that's what struck me as I was reading, was that first sentence. But you got the plaque is not the plague, right?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
The additional seating areas. What, so the additional seating areas adjacent to the western entrance to the former police building. It doesn't say anything. Are we adding seating areas? I guess I'm not clear what that statement says.
I can jump on that one. It was a staff comment just to add some pedestrian seating areas next to the entrance. It's a site plan review standard. That's what it aims for, if you guys are comfortable with it.
So it
All right,
should be-
I think-
it should be add additional seating.
Or include additional seating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was probably what got me there.
Thank you. Sorry.
I think that's it.
No.
No.
Is it important when you mention Betts that Betts be spelled correctly on this document?
It wouldn't hurt.
It needs another E.
Thank you.
I know Betts would be upset.
Rachel, what else do you have?
Yeah, I have, the developer will submit to the planning department, the color choices for the trim on the, fire station and the police station. We need to confirm that there are color choices, and that's what they're going to use, and that can go to the, planning department.
Clearly, we're in the friendly amendment portion of our meeting.
Rachel, could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
The color choices for the for the trim or siding, for the trim and siding of the fire station and police station. I don't know, it's actually the same building, but the different, for the two wings.
The expectation is for those, just so staff's clear what the expectation is, that they mimic
Correct.
or generally what was shown on the in the elevations.
Well, since they didn't show any in the elevations, that's what, so that staff is clear what will be on those elevations. They didn't have those in the plan. They didn't have the colors.
Okay.
Anything else, board?
Here, Nick, may I just add one question? I'm not sure if there's an appropriate time to ask this, or if that would be okay.
Is it related to this?
Yeah, it is. So I'm having difficulty gaining clarity just in regards to the Avesta building, just because there's a request for the Avesta building to come back in front of the board, and I'm not sure I have clarity around what that would achieve, other than, and I understand there's some question about color, and if that could be a condition of approval, if we could include that. But I guess I'm not quite sure if there's something else. I'm looking at the design and talking and conferring with my team here, and we're not 100% sure what changes we would make what you have asked for specifically. Does that make sense? If there's conditions that the staff can answer for you, then I completely understand that. That would make sense. But if there's other questions we're not clear what they are, what new changes we could make.
Jay, my understanding is that that would be subject to what, a site plan review?
Yep, I think that would come in as a, site plan review of that bill. Again, if the board, depending on whether the board's comfortable with the design, we could strike that language from here and just have the pad site come back. And I guess that is an outstanding question to the board of what your comfort level is with the existing, excuse me, Avesta building is, or if you have clear, if there's very specific things that you're looking for that staff could handle, we could also address it that way. So it really is staff's looking to the board for what your preference is. Does the board want to take a look at that building and grant final approvals, or
I would like to take a look at the building again.
Roger?
I respectfully disagree with Rachel. I mean, we've seen it now a couple of times. I think it looks pretty attractive. They've done what we've asked them to do regarding the trim, the colors, and certainly the buffering. So I don't know what more we can ask them to do.
I have a list.
Rick?
Yeah, I don't need to see it again. I believe Avesta Housing this isn't their first trip on the rodeo. They've done these types of buildings in other areas. They have a good reputation. I think they can, any questions and maybe ponder the list that Rachel has and work it through staff. But I really don't see what they're going to bring to another planning board meeting and draw the process out any further.
Rachel, is there a critical component that you would prefer to see? Is there one thing that's really?
Yes, that the doors be mullioned and the windows be mullioned, and that they consider, or actually they put in corner boards. That's in keeping with the New England vernacular. I'm not comfortable that I've actually seen the right color because there's a couple of different colors, both on the printed materials. It's tough to tell from the printed materials what the color actually is, and then seeing it on screen is difficult. And the color, since we don't know what the fire station and the police station is going to use to tie things together, I don't know that the color actually works.
And in the Zoom era, it's very tough to not have physical sample boards.
It is.
We're very challenged.
It's very difficult.
In a normal planning board meeting, we would have brought you sample boards. Could we bring sample boards and put them at town hall to get physical color samples? I mean, it's tough in this world.
Certainly, if we were going to look at the building again, it would be a very good idea to bring those samples in so that we can take a look. That building is large and it's going to be sitting there for the next 40 years. So it would be very good to be able to see those. Zoom makes it tough, and that building is too large a component of that site to guess wrong.
Would you be comfortable,
Rachel? Would you be willing to consider a planner / administrative review of those aspects? When I say that is staff will often request that I approve an administrative review of something on kind of a more mundane project. And what I was thinking was perhaps you and I could go color searching at town hall with them one day.
So in other words, pending approval.
I think the board's either going to condition the approval it's not, it gets a little dicey when you have part of a board starting to make decisions. So it's really a question if the board is comfortable with staff, I would think if the board is generally comfortable with the color palette that's been presented, and this is as a board, I've heard Rachel, and the design, then we could strike out the language that I had previously shown. If there's continuing interest, as Rachel's expressed, to see mullioned windows and corner boards added, and the board is comfortable with staff doing the final review of that design, we could do that as a condition of approval. Or again, but I think yeah.
Okay. All right, so here's, I don't love this, and Rachel, you're gonna understand. I don't love picking colors because beauty's in the eye of the beholder. However, I will agree with you that it's worth coming back, just because I feel like we are at a bit of a diminished capacity here with the number of board members. So, Roger.
Regarding, I hate to keep disagreeing with Rachel on this, but when you look at the architecture of this particular building, I'm not sure windows with mullions would be compatible with this design. So, I don't understand. I hate to have them come back because of this, this thing here.
When I hearing that there's, so right now, the way it's drafted is that the senior building would come back to the board. So if the board wants to do something different, we should probably look at making an amendment, because there is a bit of a difference on the board, having an amendment put forward that gets potentially seconded and voted upon. Otherwise, the way it's crafted now, it's coming back to the board.
Thanks, Jay. It's the way it's been motioned and amended. I mean, I motioned and seconded. It is in there to come back. So I guess base your votes on that. Any further discussion on any other aspects of this after all of the friendly amendments?
So basically, we're looking at approving everything except the senior building.
Nope, the senior building and the future commercial pad site would have to come back to us.
Oh, yeah, right. I knew about the pad site.
Correct. So basically, yeah, you're looking at the existing spaces are approved tonight.
Can I clarify something?
Yes.
It just sounds like we're coming back for a color choice on a building, not necessarily design change.
No, we're coming back to design changes too.
So yeah, I think you need to approach it as another another process you're going to have to come through to approval of the building, and whether they include mullions or the color scheme that one of our board members wants to see or it doesn't. I think at that point in time you would have a full board vote on the one site. So you would know then whether or not anything needs to change or nothing needed to change at all. So for what it's worth. Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? No. All in favor? Roger Beely.
And Jay just had his finger up.
I think Jay has something to say.
I just wanted to make a quick reminder to the board that understanding that there's still this issue and some are comfortable with the building as it is, at least as I'm hearing the conversation, and this condition has it coming back. If there's a denial of this motion, that would be a denial of the project. So if there are those that want to make an amendment to this, that this would be the time. Otherwise, a favorable approval would mean the buildings come back. A denial would be a denial of the entire, the Avesta building would come back. And of course, the undeveloped construction site. I just want to be sure folks are clear on that point, because I'm hearing at least two folks who are thinking that potentially the apartment building doesn't need to come back. But
and if we do an amendment and the amendment does not pass because there's only 4 of us, then we just go back to the original motion.
somebody could make an amendment,
Correct.
right? Somebody could make a motion to amend at this point to remove the 31 unit senior affordable building apartment from the main motion.
Right, and if the amendment doesn't pass,
And you're voting just on the motion.
right?
Correct.
So does somebody want to make an amendment?
Yeah.
I don't.
I don't see anyone making a motion, so we're just gonna stick with the main motion. I'm gonna call it. In favor, Roger Beely,
Yes.
Rachel Hendrickson,
Yes.
Rick Meinking,
Yes.
Nick McGee, yes. Thank you, gentlemen. We're gonna take a 5 to 6 minute break, freshen our eyes, get some water. We'll return shortly. Thank you. All right. Roger's back. He just had dinner.
Did?
I had to secure a charger for my laptop. Rick, you all set? Okay. I'll call it back to order. Our next item on tonight's agenda is Crossroad Holdings LLC requests subdivision amendment review for the Innovation District subdivision of the Downs, Assessors Map U53, lots 1 through 55. Jay or Jamel?
I think I'll take this one. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the applicant seeking to modify the approach to the required underground electric utilities along the private access drives throughout the Innovation District subdivision. Specifically, the applicant's proposing overhead electric utility lines within a 30-foot wide easement between lots 5 and 29 and along all of Immersion Drive. As a reminder, this is actually a continuation of the proposed amendment that the applicant started with the board last summer related to overhead versus underground utilities within the subdivision. And the current approval for the Innovation District allows for overhead power along the public streets and underground along the private access drives within the development. Staff has noted in the memo that since these materials were submitted for review several weeks ago, the applicant has notified staff that they may modify their proposal and present an alternative approach in what is described in the materials under review this evening. So while the board will not be able to formally review an alternative approach to utilities this evening, the applicant should be sure to discuss any modifications to the formal submission materials. And staff has also noted that the proposal to install overhead utility lines is proposed outside of the public right-of-way and within private property. And the site plan review ordinance allows for the planning board to require electric lines to be underground. So the board should be sure to provide direction to your comfort level with the proposal before you tonight. I'll turn it back to you at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Jamel. Dan?
Good evening, Dan Bacon, but Tom Perkins is going to lead the presentation this evening, and Adam Shane is going to assist from M&R Holdings. I don't know if Jay or Jamel or Angela, you see Adam, but he would help in the presentation if he's one of the panelists. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Jamel, and thanks, Chair. Just going to share my screen here. So tonight we're here to talk about the electrical distribution means in the Innovation District. Get a little bit of a recourse in history, and some of this was spoken to. July 2019, we got our initial approval, and that approval had several conditions with it. And what was requested and we agreed to because of our shared vision for this industrial park with the town and the Downs partners was an above ground power pole system along Innovation Drive and Center Street, which point it would simply drop underground as we got to the private drives. And we thought aesthetically, that would be pleasing and also in line with what we want this park to be. And you can see from the images that are on our slides here is we've actually are showing what's installed out there today. And so looking at this in terms of a map, red lines would be the overhead power lines, and then we would transition to green. So seems simple, straightforward enough. Last summer, we commenced our coordination with Central Maine Power and started this process. It's important to know with CMP that there's quite a process involved with working with them. This is a snip from our project management software, scheduling software that we use to organize a project. And typical work plan, if we were to take a facet, a line extension or one of the private drives, for instance, and today we started with a preliminary plan and we formally introduced that with CMP. It's 185 working days before we get the power on. And then most importantly with that, you can see that the CMP design portion starts well into the process, and it's lengthy, so that if we started today, we wouldn't know exactly what we were going to get for several months. So with that in line, and as we've been working through this process with them, a couple of weeks ago, we got this in the mail, and it was from the folks we're working with there, and basically said, by the way, I know aesthetics are important out here, but just so you know, this is what we need to do at every point that we transition to underground. And as we were settling on that, they said, and by the way, because it's transitioning to underground, we're going to have 2 of these at every intersection. So trying to understand a little bit why, it makes a lot of sense. And we completely agree with why this design, because CMP is out there usually in the middle of a snowstorm, hurricane, bad accident, and they are got crews, and you can see from this photo here, pretty typical. We've all driven by this, where you've got 3 or 4 people working around high voltage lines, trying to get the system back online. So when you look at photos that they shared with us of what it's going to be like, those are set up for their safety, and we get that, understand it now. Now that we know exactly what we're looking at, and these are the rules that they need to operate by, and we respect that. So what does that mean for us? We come back to our map and we look at every one of our private drives where we transition. We've got to have 2 of these big giant poles. So that is not really what we envisioned. I don't think it's what the planning board envisioned when we adopted that condition of approval from an aesthetics perspective. We've had several ongoing meetings. It's daily at this point, and asked CMP to give us some sort of technical information. And basically the first bullet is, if this is our standard, we need to do these big poles, 5 arms on them, all of the fuses, air brake switches, and that is the standard at every place we transition. They said, but in some situations, if we have low enough loads, that maybe we can reduce those to less arms. There'd be at least 2, and it would look something like this one we have over here on the right. But they said, however, at any time, if those loads change by an end user, they may need to go back to this. So understanding that, again, they've got to do their designs to keep their line workers safe, to keep the grid reliable. We've taken another approach to this, and Adam with our team has worked specifically with the CMP planning staff, and has an alternative solution that he'd like to discuss with us tonight. Adam?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. This is Adam Shane with the Downs team. So our proposal tonight before the board includes providing overhead power to each of the remaining private drives in the Innovation District. The plan on the screen shows this. The proposed layout continues to provide the Hendrix style poles that currently exist in the Innovation District to convey power lines down Innovation Way. It adds a single takeoff pole at the intersection of each private drive. These are shown on the plan in blue. This is in rather than the 2 poles needed to provide the underground transition. Overhead power would then be conveyed down each private drive to serve the end users with a traditional riser pole, either a pole mounted or pad mounted transformer. It's important to note that the services from transformer to building would continue to be underground. And I think that meets the intent of the town's ordinances. So our team put together a list of considerations for providing overhead power we'd like to present to the board. First, we share common goals with the town for the Innovation District, being thoughtful aesthetics and a successful economic development area. We feel overhead power helps achieve both of these goals. Overhead power allows greater flexibility in allowing end users to consider alternative energy sources. One thing we've found is that these underground systems have a load capacity that impacts the availability of putting power back into the system, if you will. With an overhead system, we're able to space out CMP safety infrastructure over a number of poles,
rather than condensing them on 1 or 2 poles, very visible within the public right of way. This approach matches the existing distribution lines in the Innovation District on Innovation Way and Center Street. We feel that continuing with this theme will fit nicely into the visual appeal of the park. Overhead power just allows us greater flexibility, as well as the town, to bring more diverse businesses into the park. And I think that's been a goal of the park from the beginning. And just again, individual sites would generally look the same with no overhead lines directly to buildings. They would be fed with underground services. So we want to be clear that a decision on this matter will not impact our intent to provide underground power for the more urban parts of the project. This is simply a better fit for the industrial park. We have already started planning other areas of the project with CMP, and moving forward, we're happy to include town staff in these meetings as a stakeholder in the project. We feel that will help both parties accomplish our common goals. So tonight, we have the opportunity to pivot our intent for power distribution design for the remainder of the Innovation District. This image shows we've got a clean slate to work with moving forward, and we'd like to change our direction to meet the aesthetic goals of the park. So just in conclusion, what is the vision for the Innovation District moving forward? Tom and I are happy to field questions. Otherwise, we'll turn it back to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. We have an opportunity for members of the public to speak this evening on the topic. If you're here in attendance and would like to talk, please use the raise my hand feature. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Rick Meinking, you want to go first?
Sure. Are there pad mounted bus cabinets that provide air brakes? Does the air brake only have to occur? Can the air brake, let me put it this way, it's been a long day. Can you do an air brake in a pad mounted cabinet? I guess that's the question.
I think the intent of the air brakes, and not the transmission engineer, is really not at a transformer that would be servicing an individual building or business. It's the actual line extension. So it serves several businesses or buildings downstream of it. That's why they put them up in the air.
Yeah, but can they be put in a cabinet on a pad?
I don't know the answer to that question, Rick.
Okay. I believe there are cabinets that can provide that air brake. I'm not an expert, but I did do a little bit of research, and there are bus cabinets that will provide air brakes. You know, certainly the alternative that you have here is much better than the 5 bar, there are 5 cross pieces. It's just not in the 21st century putting power lines in the, overhead. There's cities that are operated with underground power. This isn't that unique of a site where we can't have underground services. I was down in the Innovation District, and I'm discouraged that there's pole-mounted transformers. I thought we were all going to have, ground-mounted transformers, so that doesn't get to be unsightly. I don't think there's enough information that, we can make a decision tonight on this. It's too big of a deal to quickly make a decision based on what we have in front of us. And I understand, I don't like putting barriers in front of developers, but we made a commitment. The town has a vested interest in this area. The underground does add value to the land. It does increase reliability. We have a utility that doesn't get high marks for reliability right now. That's not me saying that. That's been out there in the public. I just don't think this is the right place that we have to go to the extent of going above ground. These runs are not that long. I remember a conversation, that the lots are about 1 acre, so that's 210 by 210 to get you about 44,000 square feet. There's not a lot of mileage here for underground wires, and I just don't understand why we can't get buried cable. We're going to have to do that downtown. I mean, it's just the transition. I think having it on Innovation Way and Center Street, I think that gave you some flexibility. I'm not thoroughly convinced that this is the only way that we can provide power to future tenants in the Innovation District. That's all I have, Nick.
Thanks, Rick. Roger? You're on mute, Roger.
Well, the only observation I would make are these new poles are pretty ugly looking to have them right on Innovation Way. And it sounds to me, and I'm far from an expert on this at all, but it sounds to me like CMP sort of has everybody up over a barrel on this. I mean, if we're gonna insist on underground going on the private ways, then we have to accept these ugly looking poles right on Innovation Way in Center Street. And I just don't think those are attractive at all. So I would, I like the last sentence in the last paragraph of the staff review, which says, well, not completely germane to the discrete proposal before the board, staff would like to offer to meet with the design team. So I'm willing to pass the buck to them. I have nothing else to offer.
Thanks, Roger. Rachel?
Yeah, I got a second Roger here. I'm happy to have the staff meet with people who understand, because the staff understands this more than I do. I think we're at the mercy of CMP. And certainly the 5-arm poles are really ugly. I was going to use a different expression, but I won't do that. The other poles, I guess the nicest thing I could say about them is they're acceptable if we can't have buried electricity, all throughout the Innovation District. Unfortunately, CMP is caught in some sort of a time warp in terms of what it's allowing or its willingness and ability to provide consistent and timely service. So I think basically I don't have a problem with the overhead poles on the side streets, but I just don't like it. I just don't think that we have any other choice, but happy to turn this over for the staff to have additional conversations and provide us with more information, and hope that Rick Duperi is on the next meeting because he knows a lot more about CMP probably than the rest of us in this room. That's it.
Thanks, Rachel. Roger?
Yeah, just one last question. maybe to Tom. Do we know if we go with the other poles, the overhead, would that expedite the time frame for CMP to do whatever they have to do for approvals?
It doesn't, you know, that time's fixed and they're pretty confident when they tell us that, you know, you change direction, then the clock starts again. So, you know, we have to mitigate that to a certain extent. The dynamic drive portion, for example, is one that we just didn't have that time. It was part of our original application to you folks for tonight. And, you know, we've got buildings ready to occupy there in June and July, and we needed to get the power to them. So we'll be transitioning there and running underground down dynamic. You know, we absolutely agree with everything that's said. And Rick, you know, it's kind of, I guess when I look at what could break in an above ground situation versus a below ground situation, and the fact that if we go below ground, that we've got to put 2 of these giant substations on a stick versus 1, that's very typical, not only if we see it everywhere here in Maine, but in other industrial parks. It's kind of baffling to us, especially when we get this information late. And the fact is we just don't have any control over what they do, where they put their air brakes or their fuses or anything else. You know, this is what we get. And, you know, they're looking forward and into, you know, a brand new subdivision. And, you know, in many ways we're at their mercy.
So basically it comes down to aesthetics. If there's no difference in the timeline, then it comes down to, do we want to see these along the main corridors, or do we want to see poles along the private roads?
Exactly.
Could we go back a couple of slides where you had the 6 or 8? It looked like crosses. All right. Yeah, there. Now, what exactly does that represent? You're saying on this one that we would need 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 air brakes?
Yep. And the reason for that is because this service dies underground for their reliability, which they've taken such criticism from. They need dual redundant primary loops that service every one of these little side streets here, these private drives. So to do that, we've got to put 2 of these things and loop it down to the end and come back up onto the other side.
Would you need them also on the other side of Innovation Drive?
No. We could treat each one of these private drive intersections as one loop, if you will.
I have a quick question. Is there any reason that they have to be located on the drive and not at the ends of the private ways?
Yes, because they're part of the main distribution feed that comes down the road. So that's where it needs to transition and run underground to the secondary transformers, which step the power down to what the buildings need.
Would you need these, as many of these, if you were not doing it with 34K and you were running it with 15K?
I don't know, but that's not a variable we can control, unfortunately. This is what they've been told that we need to do. And if we flash over to our master plan, this heavy red line here that runs concurrent with our utility corridor where our force main is going to go, this was an oh by the way from them at the beginning of last summer, when we thought we would just extend down the Downs Road here to take care of all of our new beautiful residential buildings that are going in. And they said, oh, we're out of power from Route 1 with this 12 kV line. You need to somehow get from Higas Parkway or Payne Road to make these buildings, these residences light, give them power for when you want them here this spring. So it's 34 kV or bust, unfortunately.
Rocky, go ahead. Rocky, I can't hear you. I don't know if a microphone or a mute. Rocky, we can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Rocky? No. Rocky, we can't hear you. I'm trying to dial in.
We can try to put the phone number up. Bear with me. I'll try to change my name to the phone number of the meeting.
I guess while we're waiting, Nick, if you don't mind, can I just chime
Please.
in on? Because I know when we talked about, I think it was brought up about kind of working with staff. I think I kind of volunteered myself to jump in and kind of get in the middle of some of the meetings, because we work obviously with the town. I work a lot with the same exact CMP staff with a lot of things happening around town. And so going back to trying to, I think for us in talking with this internally with staff, really kind of zooming out, I think the problem has been a little bit of, I know the planning board trying to give some flexibility, and you like we did with Center Street Innovation, the Downs, kind of allowing that overhead, but it appears that we're having these because you're dropping. So you're going above, underground, and you have all these spots instead of getting to a point where it makes sense and then dropping underground and staying underground. And I think Rick has brought this up in previous planning board meetings, is it's really not so much kind of putting electric underground, it's the transitions, right? So if you have all of these transitions, that's going to be the problem. And so I'm wondering about kind of stepping back, kind of zooming out and looking at, is there a better way, a holistic way to look at the project again, and kind of have get more into the weeds and the details of which portions are more of a priority, right, to stay underground, which I think we're hearing very clearly the center of this project needs to be underground, and the residential needs to be underground, and different pieces like that. And no matter what, we're going to have to deal with CMP and where those transitions happen. But if we can limit maybe the number of those transitions, where that has to happen. But I think in order to do that, we kind of have to look at the whole big picture again. Does that make sense? And I guess that's where I was coming at it a little bit of, is willing to kind of sit at the table. And so there's something of a better plan to come to planning board, because right now it's a lot of just a big fat line on a plan says electric. Well, now we're in the weeds and we know what we're getting. I think there needs to be a little more detail in those conversations and trying to figure that out. That's my take.
Yeah, I think a layout of a grid is more than just a stick diagram that this represents. I mean, you could loop around and go behind those batch lots and bring it in, and then you'd come up again to another air break if you needed to have one. Maybe it's not down, it's down, over, and coming back up another private way, all underground, and then come up to an air break.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rick and Angela. I think Rocky, were you able to connect into audio? Doesn't sound like it.
Is
For
this your phone number, Rocky? That I have, is the phone that's up here, is that you? I changed the name, so I asking to unmute it, but doesn't seem to want to pay attention to that request.
Okay. Well, for what it's worth, I think it'd be great for Rocky and your team to meet with staff and maybe as Angela suggested, let's take a step back and see what it is we reasonably can do with some of the limitations you're finding from CMP. And I appreciate the fact that you're acknowledging that this board has made it clear that we want to get as much of this underground and out of sight as possible. So at least you understand where we're coming from. But I think we're all pretty practical people here, and understand that there are outside forces that sometimes will impact this. But for what it's worth, I think I'm leaning towards having just asking you to have a quick meeting with staff, and then maybe we could zoom this out a little and then come up with the plan and stick to it. Like that way we don't have to keep going through this.
Okay.
Rocky wants to talk, but we can't hear you. Can't hear you at
Sign
all.
language.
No.
Must be a conspiracy.
Rocky, if you call my cell phone, I can throw you on speaker. I'm sure they can hear you.
Might get a bit of feedback with that. That's been my experience. It's worth a shot, though.
I guess what I'd just say on the, we don't really have a lot of luxury of time. You saw the timelines that we're working with CMP and how long it takes us to go from, okay, this is what we decide, to when we can get power on. And, it's months and months, and it just doesn't align with the pace of the development in the innovation district, which is exactly what we all wanted, right? The town, we wanted new innovative businesses moving into Scarborough. And, at the same time, this line, as it extends down Innovation Way, is, we've got multiple phases down there. So you can't really look at it. You have to build it as you go. And CMP's telling us this is the best way to do it, because trust me, we've pressed them. And, if there can be air brakes in a box or something like that, then and that lessens some of this visual impact, great. But I can say that with some certainty, we've asked all the questions, and we welcome staff to be part of these meetings. We'll save you a spot on the table where you can bang your head next to ours. This conversation is about aesthetics, and there's an alternate solution here that lessens that we can make tonight. If we're not ready to go down that road, then I'm not sure if we will be back to talk about it, because we just don't have time. We'll have to build it out this way. But I understand that's not, if I had gotten this information, or we had gotten this information in September, we would have been in here much sooner when we had it. But as it shows on the slide, we just got this picture 4 weeks ago. So we had to react. We don't think this is what you meant when we all said the condition of approval is to make it aesthetically pleasing. So,
thanks.
Well, I also think there's money drives a lot of decisions, and I believe that who's got the asset, whether it's the Downs has the asset or the utility has the asset, and by doing it underground, it kind of puts the asset into the Downs, and so that raises the value of this town of Scarborough's overall property. And the utilities are meant to grow, and they're designed, and they get guaranteed paybacks on their investments. And in the minute there's a storm, they're going to be back in front of the PUC asking for a rate change because of the storm damage. So it's a vicious cycle, and they are a big player, but developers can be a 600-pound gorilla too. It doesn't always have to be the utility driving. There's many different ways to get to the end game here, and it's a matter of who wants the profit and who wants the value and who wants the ownership. And I always felt like the Downs was, a very good vision for the town of Scarborough, and the infrastructure within the Downs is an asset to the town of Scarborough. And And that's why I just don't want to cave, because all of a sudden they threw this wrench at us and we haven't had the opportunity to explore other options.
Thanks, Rick. Jay, did you have anything you needed to add?
Yeah, I guess just one thing I want to be a little bit clear on, because there's obviously a lot going on. As I still understand it, the proposal still is looking to do underground, sort of up the utility corridor behind Throttle, or to the side of Throttle, if you will. That really hasn't changed, because originally there was going to be underground up. Excuse me if I get the name wrong. I think it might be Immersion Drive, if I have that right. And now really what you're talking about is underground on the other side of Throttle. What we didn't know at the time when we approved it was that we need to have these unfortunate looking poles. So I think, just for the board to sort of appreciate that. So as the board, I think generally, and Angela, correct me if I'm going astray here, we would typically say, if the board said, hey, you got to have underground power, and I'll use this example, right, that it needs to go up Immersion, and the developer said, well, actually, we're going to keep underground power. We're just going to run it up this utility corridor. We would typically call that a field change, because it principally is the same concept. And so just want to be sure. So Angela, if I start to go astray, jump right in here, that the board, because as I understand it, if they go underground in the location that's already approved, they would still have to have this big air brake thing. So I think staff would be comfortable, because it's still underground, approving it as a field change to go up the utility corridor. So I just want the board to sort of appreciate that's where staff is. And again, Angela hasn't jumped in, so I haven't stepped in anything too deep yet. And so what I'm hearing, though, so I just want to sort of set the stage and the expectations that we're going to at a minute minimally see one of these. And now what I'm hearing is there's an ongoing conversation about what happens beyond that point. So I just want to offer that as just, again, so people aren't surprised when they see at least one of these going in down the road. And I think some of when staff, and again, stop me, Angela or Jamel, when I go off the tracks here, but some of that last comment, to which I think it was Roger alluded to, where staff said, we'd be happy to speak with the applicant. I think in staff's thoughts are really around trying to see if there's a way to work with CMP early on as we start to head towards the town center, and sort of say, okay, is there one place that we can talk about a drop, and really get ahead of, because I think it's been mentioned, there's downtowns that have underground, there's it seems like there's got to be a way, and I appreciate that. I'm sure Tom and Rocky and Dan and Adam and their team have, as Tom said, whacked their head against the table plenty of times with CMP. But before we get to that next subdivision phase, that the town would really like to, just be sure CMP understands that we and the developer are rowing in the same direction on this thing. So help us get there, CMP. So.
Thanks, Jeff.
And I can't believe they didn't jump in to bail me out. I must have done okay.
Roger.
Yeah. Jay, did you just say that they would be one of those ugly looking poles right now, and then there wouldn't be any more if we decided to, if we decided to go with overhead, that they would still have to, because of dynamic drive or immersion drive, they'd have to have one of those poles there.
I'm going to ask the applicant team to answer that one. That's my understanding of it, but I'd like to hear from Tom or their team.
So I'll come back here. So when we come down the backside of Throttle now in this utility, honestly, guys, if you can imagine I mean, these right-of-ways are not very wide, these private drive right-of-ways, they were never visioned to be. And when CMP threw the curveball at us, that, by the way, you've got to double all the infrastructure and all these to make this redundant loop, it doesn't fit in dynamic drive anymore. So that's another reason why we had to find another space for it. Luckily, we had that corridor. I can tell you that trying to make it fit down for the next immersion drive is tough. And we'd actually like to leave here tonight with some sort of direction on our request. If it can only be specifically for immersion drive, you know, due to the point that we do have time to catch it ahead of those two buildings coming online this fall, and potentially go overhead there. And at least when we're looking down this long road and we've made the corner, we've accepted, you know, everything behind us is what it is, and we can look down this road, we can at least minimize what we're going to see with all these giant tree poles as you counted them down 7, 8, 10 times down this road. And you know, we can catch immersion drive with CMP schedule and get that converted. And we can talk about the rest at another time. But if we could get a ruling on immersion tonight, that would be really helpful.
Well, I guess I was going to ask you if this is this decision on our part is time sensitive in terms of affecting any of the current development going on down there. And then the other question I was going to ask is, did anybody talk to or have any discussions with any other developers in the area? And I'm thinking in particular, like over at the where Market Basket is over in Westbrook. They might be going through something similar to this. And I was just wondering if there might be, like what Rick was trying to get at, there might be a way around this. But finally, to me, I think it would, if we're talking aesthetics, one thing I think we would want to do is be consistent all the way through. Not have an ugly pole here or an ugly pole there, and then the rest of them, the regular poles. And so
I haven't personally checked in with those folks over there. I would love to find out if there's a different solution. We are working with the same team at CMP. So conceivably, I don't know what they've got for power over there, if it's a different voltage or, you know, all of these.
Yeah, Roger, I can speak to that. I mean, the Rock Row project is pretty similar to what we're planning in Town Center. So when you talk about urban development, it's very common to obviously transition underground and stay underground. And that's what we want to do in the center of the project. This is a light industrial park where it's essentially unheard of that you're underground. You know, industrial parks, light industrial parks are generally all overhead. I think for the reasons we're encountering. And this transition obviously is the issue that we're wrestling with. So we're excited to have staff assist us with CMP moving forward. We finally have CMP meeting with us at the master plan level versus reacting to when we have buildings underway. So we have the pieces coming together for planning well in advance for Town Center. It's more how we deal with immersion drive and how we deal with what's in front of us right now. And that's where, as Tom indicated, we'd really prefer to kind of be able to proceed with immersion by avoiding those two cluttered poles, Franken poles, or substations on a stick, as we've called them, and have a more consistent design with what you see on the screen here.
So if we insist on underground for immersion drive, we're basically looking at one of those ugly, one or two of those ugly poles right at Innovation. Is that right?
Them based on CMP requirements. So we don't decide if we avoid those or not. It's up to CMP.
Yeah.
Roger thinks his mic might be working now. If we can try him again.
Yeah, 1 second, Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I really understand the time is of the essence for these folks. And I I have no problem with going with overhead for immersion drive. As I said, it's acceptable. It's not desirable, but it is acceptable. Those 5-armed poles just aren't acceptable.
Thanks, Rachel. Rocky?
So I think my mic is working now.
It is. Excellent.
Oh, I had to switch to my iPad. There's a good laptop. Well, not so good. It's thrown out in the middle of Black Point Road right now if somebody wants it. I just wanted to touch on the fact that the time is of the essence for us. We've got a couple of buildings that are ready to occupy, and Central Maine Power actually has become very, very good to work with. Prior to our recent getting together, and we frankly had to go to the top to get that, their policy has always been, after you get the road paved, we're happy to look at the plans and decide on how the power will be supplied. And even though we had a light industrial park going, they never really looked at this until we were well underway. And that was simply their policy. They have changed that, and they are working hand in hand with us today. But the bottom line is their design requirements are their design requirements. They frankly are discovering those requirements as we go. And they hit us with this, what we call a Frankenpole. Just recently, it was, oh, by the way, we're going to have to use these. And that's when we said, wait a minute, time out. This isn't going to work. And they said, that's fine. We're happy to take a timeout, but don't forget, if we go to do something different, that probably means we have to start the engineering ball all over again. And, now you're looking at another 180 days before we can give you a guaranteed power date. We simply don't have the time for that. So I'm hoping that the board will work with us on immersion drive and let us keep going. We have end users that are under construction, and they will need power there. We'd love to have power there where we're actually building the building, but we certainly need to have it before they can move in. And that's basically what I wanted to say. And thank you for giving me a chance to get in here.
So what do you want? What do you want on immersion? You want it above ground?
We really need to be above ground on immersion. Now we'll drop down and serve every building underground, but we need to come down the private way with that pole line. It's really the only way we'll ever get those buildings turned on in time.
For what it's worth, I can live with immersion, but we expect, you guys are definitely going to work hand in hand with staff as well, and going forward, and hopefully no more surprises, right?
I hope not.
Can I just ask which one is immersion drive? I'm looking at the print that you have here, and there's no label on it. Is it the one that goes down between 29 and 28? Where is immersion drive? What are we?
33, 34.
33 and 34. So this is the blue line on your plans that you submitted with this package. Wow, 3 lots, and we got to go up.
It's those 3 lots, the length of those 3 lots. Is that correct? So after that, we should expect to see it transfer.
Yep.
Okay. My only other request would be, I don't like the transformers on the poles. It's ugly as sin. If we could stop that practice, that'd be great.
Understood.
All right, board. I wanna kind of bring this to a conclusion. Board, are you? What do we need here for a formal vote that we are? Are we gonna motion to approve use of overhead on immersion drive with the condition that the Downs team works with staff for future electrical?
Yeah, to come up with some sort of grid arrangement here that we can take a look at and see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. I can live with 3 lots. I mean, you're not talking a long distance, and I do believe there's cabinet mounted air brakes that can be put on pads, provide the safety for the fuses and everything like that. You see them all around big cities on blocks, and I would just like staff to be involved in laying out future power requirements for the innovation district with the goal of trying to keep things underground for resiliency, aesthetically, and value for the property.
Roger, Rachel, are we good with a motion for immersion and a condition that they work with staff for the future build out?
Yes, absolutely.
Jay?
Just a quick question. I assume, so, nope, I don't assume anything. Just clarifying point. The board is also good with the proposed underground power that would run between lots 5 and 29, correct?
Is there a reason we would not want underground power there?
What's that?
Is there a reason we would not want underground power there?
No, again, since we get to a point of a motion, it just makes everything a lot cleaner. So now it's not a field adjustment made by staff; it's a board approval.
Well, if they go with underground between 5 and 29, won't they need one of those Frankenstein poles?
But I think that's important. I think the note is it's not going down dynamic drive, it's going down a utility corridor. That's the only difference. I think that's what Jay's trying to get at. It's the location of it. You guys are already
still going to be on Innovation Drive, right?
Yeah, but you guys already approved underground dynamic drive, and instead they're just moving it to the utility corridor on the other side.
So Roger, this gets to the point I made earlier and tried to clarify with the board. There is going to be 2 of these Franken poles. And that's based on what the board's already approved. They wouldn't even have to come to this board to put 2 of those in, to go down, again, forgive me, whatever the private road there is. So 2 of those would be going in regardless. And so since there's a motion being made as a friendly amendment, I just want to, again, so it's just clear that the board is also now recognizing that the underground is going to go up this utility easement.
So the underground is already in, it's been installed along between 5 and 29?
Partially, yes.
So how difficult would it be to stop that operation and just go with overhead right there?
We would love to.
You don't want to do that?
No, we'd love to, but honestly, it's getting, we can't wait till September to turn the lights on and, the incubator.
Oh, okay, so you have to move on that because of the buildings that are going in there.
And again, it's a aesthetics conversation, right? And it's in line with the main lines coming in. And then, the whole point is we have an opportunity to change the way this view shed looks. As we turn this corner at Center Street, we look all the way down Innovation Way. That's where you're really going to get the full effect of all of these big poles in a row versus the ones here that, honestly, if they could have told us this in January even, we could have done exactly that with you folks, but we just ran out of time. We couldn't afford to lose that in the schedule.
So the motion would be to basically go with underground between 5 and 29 and put one of those, what do you call them, Franken something poles?
Yes.
Right there at Innovation Drive, right there, right? Would it be just 1 or 2?
It'd be 2.
It'd be 2. Well, I don't see where we have any choice.
That's the motion. I'll restate it. I'll make a motion to have the underground service between lots 5 and 29 continue as depicted on the plan set and include an overhead line down immersion. Okay. With the condition, can I keep going? With the condition they continue to work with staff on a broader range plan. Is that clear as mud?
clear as mud.
Thank you. I got a second, Rachel?
Yeah.
Discussion? All in favor, Roger Beely,
Yes.
Rachel Hendrickson,
Yes.
Rick Meinking.
Yep.
Yes, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know it is after our witching hour, but I am going to ask the board to consider the next one because it is a basic boundary line change that has zero impacts on anything else in the project. And wanted to know if you would be up for tackling that at this late hour.
I'm fine with tackling it, Nick.
Thank you, board. Next item on tonight's agenda is Maine Life Care Retirement Community, Inc. requests a subdivision amendment review for 5 Dorado Drive, Assessors Map R94, Lot 1D. Jamel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the proposed amendment here is seeks to correct a boundary error along the western property boundary of the project on the subdivision plan sheet. The amendment does not change any of the design requirements that the board reviewed and approved in accordance with state and local regulations. So the applicant should be sure to discuss the proposed property line adjustment with the board and compare the approved plan with the proposed corrective plan. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jamel. And for the applicant, Kevin or Charlie? So Charlie Katz-Levy in the audience.
I believe it's Jim Seymour. She's in.
Yeah,
Charlie,
sorry, names
Charlie with a
are
hand up.
bouncing around me. Trying to get people in here.
Can you hear
Jim?
me?
Yes. Yes, we can, Jim.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna see if I can get the shared screen here real quick. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. What happened is basically Sebago Technics made a mistake out here in preparing the subdivision plan. We misidentified that Newcomb Ridge Road right-of-way actually belongs to the heirs of the Newcomb family. On the subdivision plan, we had shown the blue line that I'm following right now as the external property line, when in fact, in the deeds, not on the plan, it retained the right-of-way with the Newcomb family. Therefore, the red line becomes the new external line. As Jay had pointed out, that did not change anything with the contract zone. The contract zone actually depicted this correctly. It does not change anything on the site plan as far as design or any of the practices. During all these early deliberations, the 75-foot setback was held from the edge of the right-of-way line anyway. So luckily for us here at Sebago that was the case, so this would be more problematic. Piper has reached out and has talked to the neighbors with regards to this and some other items. Obviously, we want to rectify this and make it right. This was a mistake made by Sebago and not by Piper. Piper is equally anxious, as are the neighbors, just to get this correct on paper.
Thank you, Jim. We have an opportunity for public comment on this. If there's anyone here in attendance that would like to speak, please use the raise my hand feature. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Board, if there's any general questions, please raise your hand now. No. Okay, Jamel or Jay, is there a motion for us?
Want me to share it, Jay?
I'm getting there.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Hold on, hide that.
I move to approve the project titled Corrective Subdivision Plan proposed by Maine Life Care Retirement Community, Inc. as depicted on the plan set prepared by Sebago Technics dated 3/11/21 with the following findings. Findings: the proposed subdivision amendment is for the correction of a portion of the western property boundary line error on the previously approved and recorded subdivision plan. Subdivision is located within an approved contract zone and is further identified on the town of Scarborough tax maps as map R94 lot 1D. It's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, Rachel Hendrickson,
Yes.
Roger Beely,
Yes.
Rick Meinking,
Yes.
Nick McGee. Yes, sure, that is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for waiting so late. Apologize.
If only they were all that easy. All right. It is past 10 p.m. Past 10:15. So items number 11, 12, and 13, which is Patco Construction, M&R Holdings, Carriage Walk Apartments. We'll move to table those until the next meeting, which occurs 2 weeks from tonight. Next item on our night's agenda is staff report.
I'll get started, I guess, since I spoke first. Just quick updates. So I made reference to, and I'm not sure how closely planning board members are following, but certainly council is working on the growth management ordinance. And for those that on the board that are interested, there's I think at least two amendments. Actually, one's an amendment, one's a repeal and replace that have been put forward by council. So it may be worth taking a look at the past agenda and paying attention to future agendas if you're so inclined. And I believe I've made mention before, but I'll mention again the comprehensive plan. The Long Range Planning Committee has done their work, have reviewed a number of edits coming out of the public forums and workshops and council workshops that we had in the wintertime. And that plan is actually now with the folks at Greater Portland Council of Government for some final copy edit work and other review comments before coming back and going before council. And so I think, again, this board will be part of a public hearing on that. And so if I haven't had an opportunity, very soon we'll be sending you the revised version once we get it back from GPCOG, just so sort of wanted to limit the number of versions we send you because this has been going on, and I assume you want to read it once and not read it once and then see a bunch of edits. So, but you are certainly welcome to review what's out there because it is on the town's website. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks, Jay. Jamel or Angela, you have anything on staff report?
I do not.
All set.
Okay. Administrative amendment report.
There are two to report on this month. There is a bench relocation proposed at Tandem Court in the Downs. Pretty minor amendment. And then at 23 Washington Ave, the former main indoor karting site, they did some amendments to their parking and lighting on the site for future tenants. That's it.
Thank you. Correspondence. Planning board comments. And I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a second. Roger Beely, are you in favor?
Yes.
Rick Meinking? Rachel Hendrickson? Thank you. Yes, thank you. I show this unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening. Good work.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.
Bye.